Yo, Atlas speaking, and welcome to part 2 of What If I Was Reborn into the world of Avatar as the Prince Zuko and took over the world. Let the tale begin. Chapter 21, Kyoshi Island, The Real Plan. The forest around them was still, the air thick with the weight of Victor's revelations. Kyoshi stood tall, her glowing eyes fixed on him, her expression a mix of curiosity and suspicion. The silence stretched for a moment before she finally spoke, her voice low and commanding. "You mentioned the origins of the Avatar," she said, her tone sharp. "What do you know about them? And why do you think the Avatar can help you?" Victor took a deep breath, his mind racing as he tried to find the right words. "One of the two most powerful spirits to have ever existed is one of the reasons I think the Avatar might be able to help," he began, his voice steady. "If it wasn't for one of these spirits, the world wouldn't have survived this long." Kyoshi's eyes narrowed, her expression thoughtful. "You mean Rava and Vatu," she said, her voice low. Victor nodded. "Of course. Rava and Vatu. The spirits of light and darkness. They've been at the center of the world's balance since the beginning. Whoever brought me here, whether it's one of them or some other powerful spirit, might be busy in the spirit world. I need you to look for them here." Kyoshi crossed her arms, her expression unreadable. "You want me to search the spirit world for a disturbance? For a hint of what might have brought you here?" "Yes," Victor said simply. "You're the Avatar. You're connected to the spirit world in a way I can't even begin to understand. If anyone can find a disturbance or a clue, it's you." Kyoshi studied him for a long moment, her glowing eyes piercing through him. Finally, she nodded. "I can look into it," she said, her voice firm. "But I can't guarantee any results. The spirit world is vast and unpredictable. Even I don't fully understand it." Victor nodded, his expression serious. "I understand. But any information you can find would be helpful." Kyoshi's gaze remained fixed on him, her expression thoughtful. "Is that all?" she asked after a few moments. "Do you have any other requests, Victor Crane?" Victor smiled faintly, his expression softening. "You know," he said, his tone light but sincere, "you're quite attractive. You're a really tall woman, but I could see myself drawn to you." Kyoshi's eyes widened slightly, and for a moment, she seemed taken aback. A faint blush crept across her cheeks, though she quickly masked it with a stern expression. "I have been dead for centuries, foreigner," she said, her voice firm but with a hint of amusement. "Such physical things have long since been lost to me." Victor studied her for a moment, his expression thoughtful. He wanted to ask her to remove the paint and see her face without it, but he thought better of it. Now wasn't the time. "There's a chance that could change," he said, his tone light but with a hint of seriousness. "But for now, I'm done with everything I needed to know." Kyoshi's expression softened slightly, and she nodded. "Very well," she said, her voice calm. She raised her hands, and a blurry force of energy shot out toward him, enveloping him in a swirling vortex of light and color. Before he returned to the physical world, Victor called out to her, his voice echoing through the forest. "Look for Ko the Face Stealer. He might know something." Victor found himself back in the body of Prince Zuko, standing near the towering wooden statue of Kyoshi. The transition from the spirit world to the physical realm was jarring, and he stumbled slightly, his vision blurring for a moment before clearing. He looked up and around, his golden eyes scanning the scene. Akari stood nearby, her arms crossed and her expression a mix of concern and suspicion. "Are you two all right?" she asked, her voice sharp but laced with genuine worry. Zuko didn't answer immediately. Instead, he took a moment to steady himself, brushing off the remnants of the spiritual energy that still clung to him. He looked around the village, noting that not much had changed since he had entered the spirit world. The villagers were still gathered, their eyes wide with curiosity and fear. At the far end, to the entrance of the village, he could see his crew standing with the Kyoshi warriors, their postures tense but controlled. It seemed that not much time had passed during his conversation with Kyoshi and Aang. His gaze shifted to Aang, who was slowly waking up, his gray eyes blinking as he tried to orient himself. The chains that had bound him were now shattered, lying in pieces on the ground. Zuko cursed under his breath. Stupid Kyoshi, he thought, annoyed that she had broken the chains. It was going to make things more complicated. "Are you all right, Aang?" Zuko asked, his voice calm but firm as he knelt down to help the young avatar to his feet. Aang looked at him, his expression still dazed. "Are you really Victor Crane?" he asked, his voice hesitant. Zuko's jaw tightened, and he corrected him with an annoyed tone. "Just Victor. Crane is my family name. And never call me that, any of it. When we're here, my name is only Zuko or Prince Zuko. You're the only one who knows my true identity," he whispered, his voice low so only Aang could hear. Aang nodded slowly, his expression serious. "Got it," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. Zuko helped him stand, his grip firm but not unkind. He turned to Akari, who was still watching them with a wary expression. "Are you two all right?" she asked again, her tone more insistent this time. Zuko nodded. "I'm fine," he said, his voice steady. "But the Avatar might need something to drink." "Of course," Akari said, her tone softening slightly. She gestured to one of the villagers, who quickly ran off to fetch some fresh water. Zuko turned back to Aang, his voice low as he reminded him of their plan. "Act along with it," he whispered. "We have to make this believable. I can't just take you again while you are not bound in chains, while you're free." Aang nodded, his expression resolute. He accepted the water from the villager Akari had sent, taking a few sips to steady himself. Then, with a determined look, he turned to Zuko. "If you say so," he whispered. Without warning, Aang bent a massive burst of wind at Zuko, the force of it sending him flying through the air. Zuko crashed through the wall of a nearby house, the wooden planks splintering as he landed in a heap of rubble. The villagers gasped, their eyes wide with shock. Akari turned to her warriors, her voice sharp and commanding. "Now," she shouted, her tone leaving no room for hesitation. The Kyoshi warriors sprang into action, their fans at the ready as they moved to take on the Fire Nation soldiers. The tension in the air was palpable, the villagers and warriors alike watching the scene unfold with bated breath. Zuko lay in the rubble of the wooden wall, groaning in pain as he slowly pushed himself up. His body ached from the impact, but a small smile tugged at the corner of his lips. Everything is going according to plan, he thought, his mind racing. Aang trusted him now, just as he had hoped. Kyoshi, too, seemed to believe him, which meant he wouldn't have to worry about the wrath of the Avatar state being used against him, at least not for a while. He had revealed a lot of information to gain their trust, but it was worth the risk. The lie about a powerful spirit pulling the strings behind the scenes had been the perfect cover. It was believable enough to explain the changes in the world since his arrival, and it gave him the leverage he needed to keep Aang and Kyoshi on his side. Most importantly, the power of the Avatar being not used against him while he was not ready. Although, he thought as he stood up, wincing at the pain in his ribs, I wish Aang had gone a bit easier with that attack. Zuko brushed the dust off his uniform, his golden eyes scanning the scene. The villagers were still watching him, their expressions a mix of fear and awe. The Kyoshi warriors were keeping a close eye on his crew, their fans at the ready. Everything was falling into place. Whoever brought me here, Zuko thought, his mind turning to the mysterious force he had blamed for his arrival, I'll deal with them when it matters. If it's a spirit, then I've done enough to get information from Kyoshi. For now, the plan is working. The pain he felt now was worth it. The trust he had gained from Aang and Kyoshi was invaluable. He had played his cards right, and now he was one step closer to achieving his goals. Chapter 22, Kyoshi Island, Confrontation. The air was thick with tension as the Fire Nation soldiers and the Kyoshi warriors faced off in the heart of Kyoshi village. The once peaceful streets were now a battlefield, the clash of steel and the roar of flames echoing through the air. The villagers had fled to safety, leaving the warriors and soldiers to have at it. The stakes were high, the Avatar was at the center of it all, and neither side was willing to back down. At the forefront of the battle was Lieutenant G, his face set in a grim determination as he faced off against Suki, the leader of the Kyoshi warriors. The two circled each other, their eyes locked in a silent challenge. G's fists crackled with flames, while Suki's fans gleamed in the sunlight, their edges sharp and deadly. "You're outnumbered, Fire Nation," Suki said, her voice calm but laced with steel. "Surrender now, and we'll spare your men." G smirked, his expression defiant. "We don't surrender," he said, his voice low and dangerous. "Especially not to a bunch of girls playing dress-up." Suki's eyes narrowed, and without another word, she lunged at him, her fans slicing through the air with deadly precision. G dodged to the side, his flames lashing out in a wide arc, forcing Suki to leap back. The battle was on. The fight between G and Suki was a spectacle of skill and precision. G's firebending was relentless, his flames roaring through the air like a living beast. He launched a series of rapid-fire blasts, each one aimed with deadly accuracy. But Suki was quick, her movements fluid and graceful as she dodged and weaved through the flames. Her fans snapped open and closed, deflecting the fire with ease and countering with swift, precise strikes. G growled in frustration as Suki closed the distance between them, her fans slicing through the air with deadly speed. He blocked one strike with a burst of flame, but the other fan grazed his arm, leaving a shallow cut that dripped blood. He retaliated with a powerful kick, his foot engulfed in flames, but Suki flipped backward, landing gracefully on her feet. "You're good," G admitted, his voice grudging. "But you're not good enough." Suki smirked, her eyes gleaming with confidence. "We'll see about that." The two clashed again, their movements a blur of fire and steel. G's flames roared through the air, scorching the ground and sending plumes of smoke into the sky. Suki's fans whirled around her like a deadly storm, deflecting the flames and striking back with precision. The battle was evenly matched, each fighter pushing the other to their limits. Meanwhile, the rest of the Fire Nation soldiers were locked in combat with the Kyoshi warriors. The soldiers were ruthless, their firebending attacks relentless and brutal. Flames erupted from their fists and feet, scorching the ground and forcing the warriors to stay on the defensive. But the Kyoshi warriors were skilled martial artists, their movements precise and calculated. They moved as one, their fans slicing through the air with deadly accuracy. One Fire Nation soldier launched a massive fire blast at a group of warriors, but they scattered, their movements fluid and coordinated. One warrior flipped over the flames, landing behind the soldier and delivering a swift kick to his back. Another warrior used her fan to deflect a fire blast, sending it harmlessly into the air before countering with a spinning kick that sent the soldier sprawling. The battle was brutal and bloody. A Fire Nation soldier grabbed a warrior by the arm, his flames licking at her skin, but she twisted out of his grip and slammed her fan into his face, leaving a deep gash across his cheek. Another soldier was knocked to the ground by a well-placed kick, only to retaliate with a burst of flame that singed the warrior's leg. The streets were littered with the wounded, blood staining the ground as the two sides clashed. The Fire Nation soldiers were relentless, their attacks fueled by years of training and discipline. But the Kyoshi warriors were equally determined, their movements precise and deadly. The battle was a grueling test of endurance and skill, neither side willing to give an inch. The battle raged on, the clash of fire and steel echoing through the village. The Kyoshi warriors, though outnumbered, fought with a ferocity and precision that kept the Fire Nation soldiers at bay. Lieutenant G and Suki continued their duel, their movements a blur of fire and fans, each strike and counterstrike pushing the other to their limits. The air was thick with smoke and the acrid smell of burning wood, the ground littered with the wounded and the bloodied. Amidst the chaos, Zuko and Aang maintained their facade, their battle a carefully choreographed dance of fire and air. But as the fight dragged on, Zuko could see the toll it was taking on the villagers and the warriors. The blood and gore were becoming too much, and Aang's resolve was wavering. Zuko knew he had to end this, and he had to do it in a way that would leave no doubt about his power. "Aang," Zuko said, his voice low but firm as he launched a controlled fire blast that Aang easily dodged. "I need you to back off. I'm going to end this." Aang hesitated, his gray eyes flicking to the wounded warriors and soldiers. "Zuko, this is getting out of hand. People are getting hurt." "I know," Zuko said, his voice sharp. "That's why I'm going to stop it. But I need you to trust me." Aang nodded reluctantly, his expression conflicted. "All right. But don't hurt them too badly." Zuko smirked, his golden eyes gleaming with determination. "I'll try not to." With that, Zuko stepped forward, his posture shifting as he prepared to unleash the full extent of his firebending. He raised his hands, his fingers curling as he summoned the power of the sun. The air around him grew hot, the ground beneath his feet cracking as the heat intensified. The villagers and warriors paused, their eyes widening as they felt the sheer power radiating from him. "Enough!" Zuko roared, his voice echoing through the village. "This ends now." He thrust his hands forward, and a massive wave of fire erupted from his palms, roaring through the air like a dragon unleashed. The flames were unlike anything the villagers had ever seen, a swirling inferno of orange and gold that lit up the sky. The Kyoshi warriors scattered, their fans raised to deflect the heat, but even they were forced to retreat under the sheer force of Zuko's attack. The fire wave crashed into the ground, sending a shockwave through the village. The force of it knocked several warriors off their feet, their fans clattering to the ground. The Fire Nation soldiers, too, were forced to take a step back, their eyes wide with awe and fear. Even Ji and Suki paused in their duel, their attention drawn to the spectacle. Zuko stood at the center of the inferno, his body glowing with the power of the sun. His golden eyes burned with intensity as he turned to face the Kyoshi warriors, his voice cold and commanding. "You fought bravely," he said, his tone firm. "But this battle is over. The Avatar is mine, and I will not hesitate to burn this village to the ground if you continue to stand in my way." The Kyoshi warriors exchanged uneasy glances, their faces bruised and bloodied but still defiant. Suki stepped forward, her fan still in hand, her expression resolute. "The Avatar is too important," she said, her voice steady despite the fear in her eyes. "We won't let you take him without a fight." Zuko's jaw tightened, his patience wearing thin. He had hoped to end this without further bloodshed, but the warrior's stubbornness left him no choice. He raised his hands once more, the flames around him growing hotter and brighter. "Very well," he said, his voice cold and devoid of emotion. "If you refuse to back down, then I'll show you just how outclassed you are." The air around him crackled with energy as he prepared to unleash another devastating attack. The Kyoshi warriors braced themselves, their fans raised and their bodies tense. The villagers watched in horror, their hearts pounding as they realized the true extent of Zuko's power. Chapter 23, Kyoshi Island, Show of Force. The air was thick with tension as Zuko stood at the center of the village, his body radiating an almost unbearable heat. The Kyoshi warriors, though battered and bloodied, refused to back down, their fans raised and their eyes filled with defiance. The villagers watched in horror, their hearts pounding as they realized the true extent of Zuko's power. Even the Fire Nation soldiers, who had seen their prince's strength firsthand, were awestruck by the sheer intensity of the flames swirling around him. Zuko's golden eyes burned with determination as he raised his hands, his fingers curling as he summoned the full extent of his firebending. The air around him crackled with energy, the ground beneath his feet scorched and blackened. He closed his eyes for a moment, his mind drifting back to his life on Earth, to the stories he had watched, the characters he had admired. One in particular came to mind, Escanor, the lion's sin of pride from the 7 deadly sins. Victor had always been fascinated by Escanor's ability to create a miniature sun, a ball of flame so massive and powerful that it could obliterate anything in its path. If Escanor could do it, Victor thought, his lips curling into a faint smirk, then so can I. With a deep breath, Zuko focused all of his energy, his chi surging through his body like a raging inferno. The flames around him grew hotter and brighter, their colors shifting from orange and gold to a blinding white. The heat was unbearable, forcing the Kyoshi warriors and even the Fire Nation soldiers to take several steps back. The villagers shielded their eyes, their faces pale with fear as they realized what was about to happen. Zuko's hands came together, his fingers interlacing as he began to shape the flames. The air around him shimmered with heat, the ground cracking and splintering as the temperature continued to rise. The flames coalesced into a massive ball of fire, its size growing with each passing second. It was unlike anything anyone had ever seen, a miniature sun, hovering above the village like a harbinger of destruction. The sheer size of the fireball was staggering. It loomed over the entire island, its light visible from miles away. The heat radiating from it was intense, scorching the trees and buildings nearby. The Kyoshi warriors stumbled back, their fans raised in a futile attempt to shield themselves from the heat. Even Suki, their fearless leader, was forced to retreat, her eyes wide with shock and fear. Zuko's body glowed with the power of the sun, his golden eyes blazing with intensity as he held the massive fireball aloft. The flames roared and crackled, their light casting long shadows across the village. The air was thick with the smell of burning wood and the acrid tang of smoke. The villagers and warriors alike could do nothing but stare in awe and terror at the spectacle before them. "This is your last chance," Zuko said, his voice cold and commanding. "Surrender now, or I will reduce this island to ash." The Kyoshi warriors exchanged uneasy glances, their faces pale and their bodies trembling. They had fought bravely, but this was beyond anything they had ever faced. The sheer power of Zuko's firebending was overwhelming, and they knew they stood no chance against it. Suki stepped forward, her fan still in hand but her expression one of reluctant acceptance. "We surrender," she said, her voice steady despite the fear in her eyes. "But know this, Prince Zuko, we will never stop fighting for the Avatar." Zuko nodded, his expression unreadable. "Understood." With a wave of his hand, Zuko dispersed the massive fireball, the flames dissipating into the air with a deafening roar. The heat immediately began to fade, the air cooling as the miniature sun vanished. The villagers and warriors let out a collective sigh of relief, their bodies trembling with exhaustion and fear. Zuko turned to Aang, his golden eyes filled with determination. "Let's go," he said, his voice low. "We've got a long journey ahead." Aang nodded, his expression resolute. He glanced back at the village, his heart heavy with the weight of what had just happened. But he trusted Zuko, or rather, Victor, and he knew that this was the only way forward. The village of Kyoshi lay in stunned silence as Zuko and Aang made their way down the winding path toward the forest. The air was still thick with the lingering heat of Zuko's miniature sun, the ground scorched and cracked beneath their feet. Aang walked a few paces behind Zuko, his wrists bound in chains to maintain the facade of captivity. The villagers and Kyoshi warriors watched from a distance, their faces pale with fear and disbelief. Even the Fire Nation soldiers, who had witnessed their prince's power firsthand, were silent, their usual bravado replaced by a quiet awe. Zuko, or rather, Victor, walked with his head held high, his golden eyes gleaming with a mixture of pride and satisfaction. He couldn't help but glow to himself, his mind replaying the moment he had summoned the miniature sun. The sheer power he had felt, the way the flames had roared to life at his command, it was intoxicating. He had done it. He had replicated Escaner's devastating technique, something he had only ever seen in the stories back on Earth. And he had done it with firebending, no less. "I actually pulled it off," Victor thought, a smirk tugging at the corner of his lips. "A miniature sun. Me. Prince Zuko. Unbelievable." The display had only reinforced his belief that things in this world had changed. In the show he remembered, Zuko was never supposed to be this powerful. No one but the Avatar should have been capable of wielding that kind of power. And yet, here he was, standing as living proof that the rules of this world were no longer what they once were. The thought sent a thrill through him, his mind racing with the possibilities. He recalled the way his chi had surged through his body, the raw energy coursing through his veins like a raging river. The power had been overwhelming, almost too much to control. He had barely managed to keep the miniature sun stable at a few meters across, and even then, it had taken every ounce of his focus and strength. If he wanted to, he could go bigger. Hotter. But he would need more training, more refinement. His body was still recovering from his fight with Zhao, and the strain of summoning the miniature sun had left him feeling drained. But imagine the possibilities, Victor thought, his smirk widening. If I can master this, if I can push my limits even further, there's no telling what I could do. The thought filled him with a sense of exhilaration. He had always felt powerless in his old life, a nobody in a world that didn't care about him. But here, in this world, he had the potential to become something more. Something greater. The power he had just displayed was only the beginning. With time and training, he could become unstoppable. As they descended into the forest, the cool shade of the trees providing some relief from the lingering heat, Victor glanced back at Aang. The young avatar was walking quietly, his expression thoughtful but calm. The chains around his wrists clinked softly with each step, a reminder of the role they were both playing. Victor felt a flicker of guilt, but he quickly pushed it aside. This was necessary. Aang understood that, even if he didn't like it. "You did well back there," Victor said, his voice low so only Aang could hear. "Thanks for playing along." Aang nodded, his gray eyes meeting Victor's. "I still don't like it," he said quietly. "But I trust you. Just, don't make me regret it." Victor's smirk softened, and he gave a small nod. "I won't." They continued through the forest, the sound of their footsteps muffled by the thick undergrowth. The path led them toward the beach, where the Fire Nation ship awaited. Victor's mind was still racing, his thoughts consumed by the power he had just wielded and the potential that lay ahead. He couldn't help but smile as he imagined what the future might hold. This is just the beginning, he thought, his golden eyes gleaming with determination. With this kind of power, I can change everything. The Fire Nation, the war, the world, it's all within my grasp. With Victor and Aang emerging from the forest and stepping onto the beach. The Fire Nation ship loomed in the distance, its dark hull a stark contrast to the bright blue sky. Victor's mind was already racing with plans and possibilities, his confidence bolstered by the display of power he had just unleashed. The road ahead was uncertain, but one thing was clear, Victor was no longer the powerless man he had once been. He was Prince Zuko, heir to the Fire Nation throne, and he was just getting started. Chapter 24, The Letter to the Fire Lord. The sun hung high in the sky, its golden rays reflecting off the calm, azure waters of the open ocean. The Fire Nation ship cut through the waves with a steady rhythm, its sails billowing in the warm breeze. The crew moved about the deck with practiced efficiency, their voices low and their expressions focused. The events on Kyoshi Island were still fresh in their minds, but for now, the ship was a place of relative calm. Prince Zuko sat on the front deck, his posture relaxed as he enjoyed the afternoon sun. A large table had been set up in front of him, piled high with an extravagant breakfast. The dishes were a mix of meats, fruits, and pastries, but the centerpiece was a towering mountain of roasted meats, pork, beef, and poultry stacked so high that it nearly dwarfed Zuko himself. The meat was glistening with juices, the aroma wafting through the air and making the crew's mouths water as they passed by. Zuko tore into the meal with gusto, his hands moving quickly as he devoured the food. His appetite had grown significantly since his display of power on Kyoshi Island, and he was making up for it now. His uncle, Iroh, sat nearby, sipping a cup of tea and watching his nephew with a mixture of amusement and concern. "Your appetite has certainly grown, Prince Zuko," Iroh remarked, his tone light but his eyes sharp. "I don't think I've ever seen you eat so much in one sitting." Zuko paused mid-bite, his golden eyes flicking to his uncle. He swallowed the mouthful of meat and wiped his hands on a cloth before responding. "I'd noticed it too," he said, his voice calm but thoughtful. Ever since I started bending like that, I've been hungrier. I think it's because I'm using up more chi than I'm used to. My body's trying to replenish the energy, but I can't regulate it yet. So, I eat." Iroh nodded slowly, his expression thoughtful. "It's not uncommon for firebenders to experience changes in their chi flow after a significant display of power," he said. "But you should be careful, Prince Zuko. Overexerting yourself could have consequences." Zuko shrugged, his expression unbothered. "I'll be fine," he said, returning to his meal. "I just need to figure out how to control it better. Until then, I'll keep eating." Iroh chuckled softly, shaking his head. "Well, at least you're enjoying yourself," he said, taking another sip of tea. As Zuko continued to eat, a messenger approached, his steps quick and purposeful. The man bowed deeply before holding out a rolled-up scroll. "Prince Zuko," he said, his voice respectful. "A letter for you." Zuko looked up, his golden eyes narrowing slightly. "A letter?" he asked, his tone curious. "From whom?" "From yourself, my prince," the messenger replied, his expression serious. "It's the letter you dictated earlier. The one addressed to Fire Lord Ozai." Zuko's eyes lit up with recognition, and he nodded. "Ah, yes. Read it to me." The messenger unrolled the scroll and began to read, his voice clear and steady. The letter was written in Zuko's own hand, the words formal and precise. "To Fire Lord Ozai, ruler of the Fire Nation and conqueror of the Earth Kingdom. I write to you with news of great importance. After years of searching, I have finally located the Avatar. He is currently in my custody, and I am returning to the Fire Nation with him as my prisoner. I will arrive in the capital within 4 days, where I will present him to you and the War Council in front of the assembled nobles and generals. I humbly request that my ship be granted entrance into Fire Nation waters upon our arrival. The Avatar's capture is a momentous occasion, and I wish to ensure that his presentation is met with the respect and ceremony it deserves. With respect and loyalty. Prince Zuko, heir to the Fire Nation throne." The messenger finished reading and looked up, his expression expectant. Zuko leaned back in his chair, a satisfied smile tugging at the corner of his lips. The letter was perfect, formal, respectful, and to the point. It would serve its purpose well. "Good," Zuko said, his voice firm. "Send it immediately." The messenger bowed again. "Of course, sire," he said, his tone respectful. He turned on his heel and hurried back inside the ship, the scroll clutched tightly in his hand. Zuko returned to his meal, his mind already racing with thoughts of the future. The letter was the first step in his plan, and he was confident that it would achieve the desired effect. Fire Lord Ozai would be expecting him, and the stage would be set for his grand return. As he ate, Zuko couldn't help but feel a sense of satisfaction. The events on Kyoshi Island had proven that he was more powerful than anyone had anticipated, and now he was returning to the Fire Nation with the Avatar in tow. The pieces were falling into place, and Zuko was exactly where he needed to be. With Zuko enjoying his meal and the ship sailing steadily toward the Fire Nation. The letter to Fire Lord Ozai had been sent, and the stage was set for Zuko's grand return. The next phase of his plan was about to begin, and the stakes had never been higher. Early morning in the Fire Nation capital. The dawn sun cast a golden glow over the Fire Nation capital, its light illuminating the imposing silhouette of the Fire Nation royal palace. The structure stood as a testament to the might and grandeur of the Fire Nation, a fortress of flame-colored spires and intricate gold detailing. Its walls, painted in deep crimson and accented with ornate carvings of dragons, gleamed under the morning sun. At the heart of the palace, rising above all else, was the central tower, a symbol of the Fire Lord's absolute authority. The palace grounds stretched far, adorned with elaborate courtyards, koi ponds, and flame-lit torches that never extinguished, each an emblem of the nation's unwavering power. Beyond the palace, the capital city was beginning to stir. Soldiers patrolled the outer walls, citizens went about their morning routines, and banners bearing the insignia of the Fire Nation fluttered in the warm breeze. It was a new day in the land of fire, a day that would soon bring unexpected news to its ruler. Deep within the palace, Fire Lord Ozai sat in the dimly lit war room, a space reserved for the grandest of military strategies. The room was cavernous, its walls lined with maps, battle reports, and ancient scrolls detailing Fire Nation conquests. The centerpiece was an enormous map of the world, stretched across an obsidian table, with miniature Fire Nation banners marking territories under the Empire's control. Other markers represented the remaining Earth Kingdom strongholds and the movements of enemy forces. Ozai, draped in regal fire-colored robes embroidered with gold, sat upon a high-backed chair, his presence alone enough to command obedience. His sharp, angular face was bathed in the flickering glow of nearby torches, casting deep shadows across his chiseled features. His golden eyes, cold and piercing, scanned the latest reports as he listened to the general before him. "We need the resources to cut them from the flank, sire," the general stated, his voice steady yet firm. "But that can only work if our other division succeeds in their operation." Ozai took the report the general handed him and read through it in silence. His gaze flicked over the battle details, his mind already calculating the best course of action. "Absorb the nearby infantry divisions, including the 34th and the 35th, Ozai said, his voice smooth but authoritative. "That should provide enough men to flank their weak side." "Of course, sire," the general said, bowing before exiting the chamber. Left alone except for a few attendants standing silently at the edges of the room, Ozai's eyes remained fixed on the world map. His fingers lightly tapped against the table as he analyzed the vast battlefield before him. Then, without shifting his gaze, he spoke. "Good morning, Azula." Princess Azula walked forward, her steps graceful yet calculated. "Good morning, father. How goes the plans for the Jita province?" "It was successful, as always," Ozai replied dismissively, not even sparing her a glance. Azula's brow twitched slightly in irritation. She despised being ignored, especially by the one person whose approval she sought the most. But before she could press further, the door to the war room opened, and a soldier stepped inside. "Sire, we have just received an urgent letter from Prince Zuko," the soldier announced. For the first time that morning, Ozai looked up, his golden eyes locking onto the messenger with interest. Azula's irritation deepened, her father never gave Zuko this much attention. "Zuko, you say?" Ozai's voice held an edge of intrigue. He extended a hand, motioning for the soldier to approach. The scroll was placed in Ozai's grasp, and he unrolled it carefully. His eyes skimmed the words, his expression unreadable. But then, something unexpected happened, his gaze widened ever so slightly. It was subtle, but Azula noticed it immediately. "Well, that was unexpected," Ozai muttered. Azula folded her arms, her eyes narrowing. "What does Zuko want now?" she asked, already accustomed to her brother's past pleas for resources. Ozai's lips curled slightly as he handed her the letter. "Your brother has done the impossible." Azula snatched the scroll and read through it quickly. Her eyes darted across the words, and when she reached the end, she felt a flicker of disbelief. "This can't be true," she said, her voice sharp. "We will see about that," Ozai replied, his tone calm yet filled with intrigue. He turned back to the soldier. "Send word to all ships within our borders, Prince Zuko is to be granted entrance upon arrival." "Yes, sire," the soldier said, bowing before exiting. Azula's fists clenched at her sides. "Father, you cannot possibly believe this nonsense." "We will all see, Azula," Ozai said coolly. "Your brother will be returning, having done what I ordered him to do, proving that he is not weak." He turned to another attendant. "Spread word. Inform the War Council and the noble factions, Prince Zuko will return to the capital in 4 days' time, and he has brought the Avatar." The attendant bowed deeply. "Yes, sire," he said before swiftly leaving the chamber. Azula watched her father carefully. The way his lips curled slightly upward, the almost imperceptible shift in his posture, was that a smile? A chill ran down her spine. What the heck is going on? She thought. Chapter 25, Your Future Fire Lord. The air in the war room felt heavier now. The torches lining the stone walls flickered slightly, casting long shadows that danced like spirits across the massive map table in the center of the chamber. Fire Lord Ozai stood with his hands clasped behind his back, his golden eyes fixed on the intricate details of the world map before him. Azula, still standing opposite him, felt something unusual, something she was not accustomed to. Doubt. She had always been the favored child, the prodigy, the one with limitless potential. From the moment she first produced blue flames, it had been clear to everyone, including her father, that she was destined for greatness. She had been raised with one undeniable truth: she was superior to Zuko in every way. And yet, here stood her father, the most powerful man in the world, declaring that her banished, disgraced brother had returned from exile with the Avatar as his prisoner. That he had done the impossible. It made no sense. "Father," Azula spoke again, her voice controlled but firm. "You cannot possibly believe Zuko. We have no proof. What if he's lying?" Ozai's eyes shifted to her, the intensity of his gaze making her straighten her posture. "We will see about that when he arrives," he repeated, his voice unwavering, carrying the weight of absolute authority. Azula clenched her teeth, but before she could protest, Ozai continued, his words slow and deliberate. "Zuko knows the conditions of his banishment. He knows that he would not dare attempt trickery, not when so much is at stake." His tone hardened as he stared into her golden eyes. "And neither should you." The words cut through her like a blade, cold and sharp. Azula inhaled deeply through her nose, willing herself to remain composed. She could tell by her father's tone that he had already made up his mind. There was no room for negotiation, no convincing him otherwise. Still, she needed to know. She needed to hear it from him, from his own lips. "So what does this mean for me?" she asked, her voice quieter now, controlled but tinged with something else, something almost fragile. "As your heir?" For the first time since the conversation began, Ozai turned his full attention to her. He stepped closer, his towering presence forcing her to tilt her chin up slightly to meet his gaze. His expression was unreadable, neither cruel nor kind, but absolute. "Zuko has done the impossible," Ozai declared. "He has found and captured the Avatar. He, if what he says is true, has proven that he is not weak, but a strong and powerful firebender. A worthy heir to me." Azula felt her breath hitch slightly. "As such," Ozai continued, his voice like rolling thunder, "he will be the crown prince of the Fire Nation once more. He will be your crown prince." Silence filled the room, suffocating and absolute. Ozai leaned in ever so slightly, the firelight reflecting off his sharp features. "He will be your future Fire Lord." Azula stared at him, her mind racing. She felt the sting of something unfamiliar, something she had never truly allowed herself to feel: rejection. Her fingers curled into fists. Her father, was replacing her. A mix of emotions swirled within her: anger, disbelief, humiliation. But above all else, there was betrayal. She had worked her entire life to prove she was superior. She had won every battle she fought, crushed every opponent, surpassed every expectation. And yet, here was Zuko, returning from exile after years of failure, after years of proving himself weak, and suddenly, he was worthy. It was absurd. Her lips parted as if to speak, but no words came. Instead, she clenched her jaw, her breath unsteady, and without another word, she turned on her heel and stormed out of the war room. Her footsteps echoed sharply through the grand halls of the palace, her vision slightly blurred as she fought the burning in her eyes. No. She would not allow this. Azula's anger burned hotter with each step as she descended the palace stairs and walked toward the military wing, where she knew the soldier who had delivered the letter would be. She found him in one of the main halls, standing with another guard. Upon noticing her approach, the soldier quickly stood at attention, bowing his head respectfully. "Princess Azula," he greeted cautiously. She stopped a mere foot away from him, her golden eyes boring into his. "When did the message from Zuko arrive?" The soldier straightened. "The carrier bird brought it less than half an hour ago, Princess. It was delivered to the Army Communications Tower." Azula's brow furrowed. "And before this, when was the last time my brother sent a message?" The soldier hesitated slightly, clearly sensing her agitation. "I am not entirely certain, Princess," he admitted. "But I believe it was 3 months ago? He was requesting additional supplies." Azula narrowed her eyes. So for 3 months, there was nothing. And now, suddenly, he has done the impossible? The soldier gulped slightly, uncertain if he should respond. Azula's mind raced. This was far too convenient. Zuko had sent nothing for months, and now, out of nowhere, he claimed to have captured the Avatar? The timing was suspicious, too suspicious. Her father was willing to accept this news without question. But she wasn't. The soldier shifted slightly. Princess, if you seek further details on Prince Zuko's recent movements, you may have to speak with the chief at the communications tower. He monitors most of the reports from other bases in the area where the prince was sailing. Azula studied him for a moment before finally stepping back. Fine, she said coldly. Without another word, she turned on her heel and walked toward the palace exit. As she made her way down the marble steps of the palace and into the courtyard, her mind burned with questions. Something isn't right. Zuko was a failure. A disgrace. She had watched him be beaten in an Agni Kai, had seen him fall to his knees in shame. He had spent years chasing ghosts and returning empty-handed, a laughingstock of the royal family. And now, she was supposed to believe that he had succeeded? That he had somehow bested the Avatar and was returning victorious? No. There was more to this. And if her father refused to see it, she would uncover the truth herself. Azula's jaw tightened, her hands balled into fists. If Zuko thought he could take from her what she had rightfully earned, he was sorely mistaken. With that final thought, she stepped out of the palace gates and into the capital city, her destination clear. The communications tower. She would find out the truth. Chapter 26, The Communications Tower. The sun was high in the sky, casting a warm, golden glow over the bustling port city at the base of the Fire Nation capital. The city was alive with activity, merchants opening up their stalls, sailors unloading cargo from ships, and soldiers patrolling the streets with disciplined precision. The air was thick with the scent of salt and smoke, the sounds of clanging metal and distant shouts filling the atmosphere. Princess Azula stepped out of her ornate carriage, her golden eyes scanning the scene with a sharp, calculating gaze. The carriage, pulled by a pair of massive Komodo rhinos, had made the journey from the palace to the port in just under an hour. The ride had been smooth, but Azula's mind was anything but calm. She had spent the entire trip stewing over her father's words, her anger simmering just beneath the surface. Zuko, the banished prince, the failure, had somehow managed to capture the Avatar? It was absurd. And yet, her father had accepted the news without question. Azula, however, was not so easily convinced. The communications tower loomed ahead, a tall, imposing structure made of dark volcanic stone. It was one of the most important buildings in the port, serving as the hub for all military communications across the Fire Nation. Azula strode toward the entrance, her posture regal and her expression cold. The soldiers stationed at the gate immediately snapped to attention, their eyes widening as they recognized the princess. "Princess Azula," one of the soldiers exclaimed, bowing deeply. "What brings you to the communications tower?" Azula didn't bother to respond. She simply walked past them, her boots clicking against the stone floor as she entered the building. The soldiers exchanged nervous glances before scrambling to follow her, their voices low and urgent as they called for the tower chief. Inside, the tower was a hive of activity. Messengers hurried back and forth, carrying scrolls and reports, while soldiers manned the communication stations, sending and receiving messages from across the Fire Nation. The air was filled with the hum of voices and the occasional crackle of firebending-powered devices. Azula's presence immediately commanded attention. The soldiers and messengers froze as she walked through the room, their eyes wide with a mixture of awe and fear. She ignored them, her gaze fixed on the door at the far end of the room, the office of the tower chief. "Where is the chief?" Azula demanded, her voice sharp and commanding. A young soldier stepped forward, his face pale. "He's in his office, Princess," he stammered. "I'll fetch him for you." "No need," Azula said, her tone icy. "I'll see him myself." She pushed past the soldier and strode toward the office, her footsteps echoing through the room. The soldiers and messengers quickly moved out of her way, their heads bowed in respect. Azula reached the door and pushed it open without knocking, her golden eyes scanning the room. The office was cluttered with scrolls, maps, and various communication hawks. The walls were lined with shelves filled with books and documents, and a large map of the Fire Nation hung on the far wall. Sitting behind a desk piled high with papers was the Tower Chief, an elderly man with a hunched posture and a face lined with age. His hair was thin and gray, and his eyes were sharp and intelligent, despite his advanced years. He wore a simple robe, the fabric worn but clean, and his hands were stained with ink from years of writing. The old man looked up as Azula entered, his expression calm and unbothered. "Ah, Princess Azula," he said, his voice raspy but strong. "To what do I owe the pleasure?" Azula's eyes narrowed at his casual tone. Most people would be scrambling to show her respect, but this old man seemed unfazed by her presence. It was unusual. "You're the Tower Chief?" Azula asked, her tone sharp. The old man smiled faintly. "That I am," he said. "Name's Hiroshi. I've been running this tower since before you were born, Princess. Seen my fair share of royalty come and go." Azula's lips curled into a sneer. "I don't give a damn about your history, old man. I'm here for information. I want reports on all of Prince Zuko's movements, every sighting, every report, everything that's coming about him." Hiroshi leaned back in his chair, his expression thoughtful. "Ah, I see you've heard about the Avatar," he said, a faint smile tugging at the corners of his lips. He seemed to be enjoying her obvious displeasure, which only fueled Azula's anger. "Don't play games with me," Azula snapped. "I want those reports. Now." Hiroshi held up a hand, his expression calm. "Patience, Princess. I'll get you what you need." He turned to his desk and began sifting through the piles of documents, his movements slow and deliberate. After a moment, he pulled out a scroll and unrolled it, his eyes scanning the contents. "The latest report came just a few days ago," Hiroshi said, his voice steady. "From a naval base near the South Pole. Prince Zuko was there, stocking up on supplies and making repairs to his ship. While he was there, he came to blows with the commander of the base, a man named Zhao." Azula's eyes narrowed. "Zhao? Who is he?" "A rising star in the Navy," Hiroshi explained. "Ambitious, ruthless, and quite powerful. According to the report, Zhao and Prince Zuko had a disagreement and things escalated, and Zuko challenged Zhao to an Agni Kai." Azula's lips curled into a vicious smile. "Let me guess, Zuko lost." "Same week, pathetic Zuko as always." Hiroshi shook his head, his expression serious. "Oh, I wouldn't say that, Princess. Prince Zuko may have lost, but it wasn't because he was weak or outfought. Zhao used lightning to defeat him, something Zuko wasn't expecting. In terms of pure firebending, the reports say Zuko held his own and could have even won if Zhao hadn't used his trump card." Azula's smile faded, replaced by a look of surprise. "Zuko held his own against Zhao? That's unexpected." Hiroshi nodded. "Indeed." Azula's mind raced as she processed the information. Zuko had not only captured the Avatar but had also held his own against a powerful firebending master? It didn't make sense. Zuko was supposed to be weak, a failure. And yet, the evidence was right in front of her. "This Zhao character sounds interesting," Azula said, her tone thoughtful. "But how did the Agni Kai even come about? What started it?" "The Avatar," Hiroshi said simply. "Zhao discovered that Zuko had captured him, and things spiraled from there. According to the report, at least." Azula's eyes narrowed as she considered the implications. If Zuko had truly captured the Avatar, then his return to the Fire Nation would change everything. But if there was even a chance that he was lying, or that the reports were inaccurate, she needed to know. "I want every report you have on Zuko's movements," Azula said, her voice cold and commanding. Everything. And I mean everything single thing. Hiroshi nodded, his expression calm. Of course, Princess. I'll have my men gather everything for you. Azula turned on her heel and strode out of the office and into the communications room where the Hawks arrived with reports from all over the world. Her mind racing. The pieces of the puzzle were beginning to come together, but there were still too many unanswered questions. Zuko's sudden success, his newfound strength, the timing of his return, it all seemed too convenient. As she stepped back into the office, Azula's golden eyes burned with determination. She would uncover the truth, no matter what it took. And if Zuko thought he could take what was rightfully hers, he was sorely mistaken. There she continued to wait for the men to gather up their reports. Chapter 27, Covert Operatives. Azula stood in the cluttered office of Hiroshi, the elderly tower chief, her golden eyes narrowing as she processed the information he had just given her. The idea that Zuko had not only captured the Avatar but had also held his own against a powerful firebender like Zhao was troubling. It didn't fit the narrative she had built in her mind, the narrative of Zuko as a weak, banished failure. And yet, the evidence was right in front of her. Her mind raced as she considered the implications. If Zuko had truly captured the Avatar, then his return to the Fire Nation would change everything. But if there was even a chance that he was lying, or that the reports were inaccurate, she needed to know. And there was one detail that didn't sit right with her. This Zhao, Azula said, her voice sharp and demanding. Why would a firebender of his caliber be stationed in the armpit of the war? The South Pole is a frozen wasteland. There's no threat there. No strategic value. So why would someone like him be sent there? Hiroshi leaned back in his chair, his expression thoughtful. He stroked his thin, gray beard as he considered her question. Ah, that's a good question, Princess, he said, his voice calm and measured. Zhao was not that special a commander, however, and his ambition is well known. But the South Pole, well, it's as insignificant as it might seem. Azula's eyes narrowed. Explain. Hiroshi nodded, his hands resting on the desk in front of him. The South Pole and the surrounding areas, including the southern provinces of the Greater Earth Kingdom mainland, is the home of the Southern Water Tribe. While they are not as strong as they once were, they are still a thorn in the Fire Nation's side. Zhao was sent there to oversee the final stages of the southern province's subjugation. His mission was to ensure that they posed no further threat to our operations. Azula's lips curled into a sneer. The Southern Water Tribe? They're a bunch of savages living in igloos. They're no threat to the Fire Nation. Hiroshi shrugged, his expression unbothered. Perhaps not. But the Earth Kingdom forces there are, and the Avatar was last seen in the region of the South Pole. It's possible that Zhao was sent there to monitor the situation and ensure that the threats didn't resurface. Azula's eyes narrowed further. And yet, according to your reports, Zuko was the one who captured the Avatar. Not Zhao. Hiroshi nodded. Indeed. It seems that Zhao's mission was complicated by Prince Zuko's presence. Azula's mind raced as she considered the implications. If Zhao had been sent to the south to monitor the South's potential return, then his confrontation with Zuko made sense. But it still didn't explain why someone of Zhao's caliber would be stationed in such a remote and seemingly unimportant location. It was important enough of a reason to send a commander, a firebender of that level, towards such a weak and unimportant area. There's more to this, Azula said, her voice cold and sharp. If Zhao is ambitious as you said, he wouldn't waste his time in the south unless there was something there worth his attention. What aren't you telling me, old man? Hiroshi's expression remained calm, but there was a flicker of something in his eyes, something that Azula couldn't quite place. Princess, I assure you, I've told you everything I know. Zhao was sent to the South Pole to oversee the subjugation of the southern provinces and to monitor the situation regarding the Southern Water Tribe. Beyond that, I cannot say. Mostly because he wasn't this capable a firebender at the time. His skills as a bender may have only recently come into bloom. Azula's eyes narrowed, her suspicion growing. She didn't trust this old man. There was something he wasn't telling her, and she was determined to find out what it was. "Fine," Azula said, her tone icy. "But I want every report you have on Zhao's activities in the south in addition to all the reports you have on Zuko." "Everything." Hiroshi nodded, his expression calm. "Of course, Princess. My men are already on it." Azula turned on her heel and strode out of the office, her mind racing. The pieces of the puzzle were beginning to come together, but there were still too many unanswered questions. Zuko's sudden success, his newfound strength, the timing of his return, it all seemed too convenient. And now, there was Zhao, a powerful firebender stationed in the most remote corner of the world. What was he really doing there? Azula was about to leave the communications tower when Hiroshi's voice called her back. "Princess, there's one more thing," he said, his tone calm but insistent. Azula paused, her back still turned to him. She didn't turn around, but her voice was sharp. "What is it, old man?" Hiroshi leaned forward, his hands resting on the desk. According to the same reports that detailed the Agni Kai, Prince Zuko and his ship were seen heading in the direction of Kyoshi Island after the confrontation with Zhao. Scouts confirmed that he landed on the island a few days later and left port a few hours later, heading toward the capital. Azula turned slowly, her golden eyes narrowing. Kyoshi Island? What was he doing there? Hiroshi shrugged, his expression thoughtful. "We don't know much about what happened on Kyoshi Island, except that there was a skirmish. The details are unclear, but it seems that Zuko's men engaged with the Kyoshi warriors. If you'd like, we can send a small team to investigate further." Azula stood in silence for a moment, her mind racing. Kyoshi Island was a minor outpost, but it was home to the Kyoshi warriors, a formidable group of fighters. If Zuko had engaged with them, it could mean that he was trying to cover his tracks or that he had encountered resistance in his mission to capture the Avatar. Either way, it was another piece of the puzzle that didn't quite fit. "There's too much of an information gap," Azula said finally, her voice cold and calculating. "Prepare 2 teams of covert operatives. One team will go to Kyoshi Island, and the other will investigate the naval base where Zuko fought Zhao. I want their full reports by the time Zuko lands on the shores of this port. Do you understand?" Hiroshi nodded, his expression calm. "Of course, Princess. I'll see to it immediately." Azula's eyes narrowed as she studied the old man. "And make sure they're discreet. I don't want Zuko or anyone else to know that we're investigating him." Hiroshi gave a small bow. "Understood, Princess. I'll ensure that the teams are selected from our most skilled operatives." Azula turned on her heel and strode toward the door, her mind already racing with plans. As she reached the threshold, she paused and glanced back at Hiroshi. "And send the reports on Zhao and Zuko's movements to my private quarters in the palace. I'll be awaiting them." Hiroshi nodded again. "It will be done, Princess." With that, Azula left the communications tower, her golden eyes burning with determination. The pieces of the puzzle were beginning to come together, but there were still too many unanswered questions. Zuko's sudden success, his newfound strength, the timing of his return, it all seemed too convenient. And now, with the addition of Kyoshi Island and Zhao's mysterious activities, the situation was becoming even more complex. As she stepped into her carriage, Azula's mind was already racing with plans. She would uncover the truth, no matter what it took. And if Zuko thought he could take what was rightfully hers, he was sorely mistaken. With Azula returning to the palace, her mind focused on the task ahead. The operatives' teams would soon be dispatched, and the truth about Zuko's activities would be revealed. The stage was set for a confrontation, and the stakes had never been higher. Chapter 28, The Prince's Quarters. The brig of Zuko's ship was cold and damp, the faint hum of the engine reverberating through the metal walls. Aang, Katara, and Sokka sat huddled together in their cell, the chains around their wrists clinking softly as they shifted. The air was thick with tension, the weight of their captivity pressing down on them. They had been silent for a while, each lost in their own thoughts, when the heavy metal door creaked open. Zuko stepped into the brig, his golden eyes scanning the cell with a calm but commanding presence. His uniform was immaculate, the Fire Nation emblem gleaming on his chest, and his expression was unreadable. He stopped in front of the cell, his arms crossed over his chest as he regarded the three prisoners. "We'll be arriving in the Fire Nation capital within a few days," Zuko said, his voice firm and devoid of emotion. "I thought you should know." Aang's eyes widened, and he exchanged a quick glance with Katara and Sokka. "The Fire Nation capital?" Aang asked, his voice tinged with disbelief. "What are you planning to do with us there?" Zuko's lips curled into a faint smirk. "That's none of your concern," he said, his tone cold. "Just know that your cooperation will make this easier for everyone." Sokka's jaw tightened, and he leaned forward, his chains rattling. "We're not going to cooperate with you, Zuko," he said, his voice sharp. "We'll find a way to escape before we even get there." Zuko's smirk widened, and he took a step closer to the cell. "You can try," he said, his voice low and dangerous. "But I wouldn't recommend it. You're outnumbered, outgunned, and out of options. So shut it." Sokka opened his mouth to retort, but Aang placed a hand on his arm, silencing him. The young Avatar's gray eyes were calm but resolute as he looked at Zuko. "What do you want from us?" Aang asked, his voice steady. Zuko's gaze shifted to Aang, and for a moment, there was a flicker of something in his eyes, something that Aang couldn't quite place. But it was gone as quickly as it appeared, replaced by the cold, calculating expression that Zuko always wore. "I want Katara to come with me," Zuko said, his tone firm. Katara's eyes widened, and she instinctively leaned back, her chains clinking as she moved. "What? Why?" Zuko didn't answer immediately. Instead, he turned to the guard standing by the door and signaled for him to open the cell. The guard stepped forward, his keys jingling as he unlocked the door. Zuko reached inside and grabbed Katara's arm, pulling her to her feet. "Zuko, wait!" Aang said, his voice rising with concern. "What are you doing?" Zuko ignored him, his grip firm as he led Katara out of the cell. Aang stood up, his chains rattling as he moved. "Katara, don't do anything dangerous," he said, his voice low but urgent. "Just trust me." Katara looked back at Aang, her blue eyes filled with uncertainty. "Aang, I mean it," Aang interrupted, his voice firm. "If anything happens to her, Zuko, I'll sink this whole ship. I swear it." The air in the brig grew heavy as Aang's words hung in the air. His gray eyes burned with a quiet intensity, and for a moment, even Zuko seemed taken aback by the Avatar's resolve. But the moment passed, and Zuko's smirk returned. "Noted," Zuko said, his tone dry. He turned and led Katara out of the brig, the heavy metal door clanging shut behind them. Katara followed Zuko through the metal halls of the ship, her mind racing with questions. The corridors were dimly lit, the faint hum of the engine filling the air as they walked. She glanced at Zuko's back, her blue eyes narrowing as she tried to figure out what he was planning. Why had he taken her out of the cell? What did he want from her? And why had Aang told her to go with him? She couldn't shake the feeling that something was different about Aang. Ever since they had returned from Kyoshi Island, he had been acting strange. More confident, more accepting of the Fire Nation treatment of them. It was as if he had changed somehow, but she couldn't quite put her finger on how. After about 10 minutes of walking, Zuko stopped in front of a door and pushed it open. He stepped inside, leaving the door ajar for Katara to follow. She hesitated, standing at the entrance and looking left and right down the hallway. Her mind raced with possibilities. Should she try to make a run for it? Or should she trust Aang and see what Zuko wanted? "Don't even think about it," Zuko's voice called from inside the room. "You wouldn't even get a few feet away." Katara's jaw tightened, and she reluctantly stepped inside, her blue eyes scanning the room. Zuko's quarters were surprisingly modest for a prince. The walls were lined with maps and scrolls, and a small desk sat in the corner, piled high with papers. His dual broadswords hung on the wall, their blades gleaming in the dim light. A narrow bed was tucked into the corner, neatly made but clearly well used. Zuko sat down behind the desk, his golden eyes fixed on Katara. "Sit," he said, his tone calm but firm. Katara crossed her arms over her chest, her expression defiant. "What do you want from me, Zuko?" she demanded. Zuko's expression didn't change, but the air in the room seemed to grow hotter, the temperature rising as his aura intensified. "Sit down, Katara," he said slowly, his voice low and commanding. Katara hesitated, her defiance wavering under the weight of Zuko's presence. Reluctantly, she sat down in the chair across from him, her blue eyes burning with anger. "What do you want from me?" she asked again, her voice sharp. Zuko leaned back in his chair, his expression calm but his eyes sharp. "We'll get to that," he said. "But first," he paused, his gaze locking onto hers. "Tell me, how much do you love your brother?" The question hung in the air, heavy and loaded. Katara's eyes widened, and she felt a chill run down her spine. Zuko's aura was overwhelming, his presence filling the room with an almost tangible heat. The threat in his words was unmistakable, and Katara's mind raced as she tried to figure out what he was planning. With Katara sitting across from Zuko, her heart pounding as she tried to make sense of his question. The tension in the room was palpable, and the stakes had never been higher. What did Zuko want from her? And what did her brother have to do with it? Chapter 29, The Bargain. Katara sat across from Zuko, her heart pounding as his question hung in the air like a storm cloud. The heat in the room was almost unbearable, and the intensity of his gaze made it hard to think. She clenched her fists, her nails digging into her palms as she tried to steady herself. "What do you mean by that?" Katara asked, her voice sharp but laced with unease. "Why are you asking me about my brother?" Zuko leaned forward, his elbows resting on the desk, his golden eyes locked onto hers. "I asked you a simple question," he said, his tone calm but firm. "How much do you love your brother?" Katara's jaw tightened, and she glared at him. "I love my brother very much," she said, her voice trembling with anger. "He's the only family I have left." Zuko's lips curled into a faint smirk, and he leaned back in his chair. "Well, then," he said, his tone almost casual. "This makes things rather straightforward." Katara's eyes narrowed, and she leaned forward, her chains clinking as she moved. "What are you talking about, Zuko? What do you want from me?" Zuko's expression remained calm, but there was a flicker of something in his eyes, something cold and calculating. "I want you to think about your family," he said, his voice low and deliberate. "Think about how your mother was killed. Think about how your father had to go to war. Think about how Sokka is the only one left here on this ship." Katara's breath hitched, and she felt a lump form in her throat. "Don't you dare talk about my family," she said, her voice shaking with anger. "You have no right." "I have every right," Zuko interrupted, his tone sharp. "Because from this moment on, you're going to be working for me. My beautiful plaything I can hold and squeeze whenever I want. Without question." Katara's eyes widened, and she shook her head. "What? No! I'm not going to." "You don't have a choice," Zuko said, his voice cutting through hers like a blade. "Something is going to happen in the capital, and when it does, the only way to save Aang will be if you're close to me. You'll be my personal maid. The rest of the crew will think that you're my new muse, a girl from the water tribe that I took because I fancied her. That's the role you'll be playing from tomorrow onward." Katara stared at him, her mind reeling. "You're insane," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I'm not going to play along with this sick game of yours." Zuko's smirk widened, and he leaned forward again, his golden eyes burning with intensity. "Oh, you will," he said, his voice low and dangerous. "Because if you don't, Aang and Sokka will die. The only way they leave the Fire Nation alive is if you do exactly as I say. There will be no negotiation." Katara's hands trembled, and she clenched them into fists to steady herself. "You're a monster," she said, her voice shaking with anger. "I'll never." "You will," Zuko interrupted again, his tone cold and unyielding. "You said it yourself, you love your brother very much. He's the only family you have left. So for him, and for Aang, you'll play along. You'll be my shadow, my nice thing to have. I won't rape you or do any such things, but I will touch you and squeeze those little developing I mean breasts of yours. The world will see you as my pleasure thing. The crew will see you as such, and so will the Fire Nation. And if you want Aang and Sokka to live, you'll do exactly as I say." Katara's mind raced, her heart pounding in her chest. She wanted to scream, to lash out at him, but she knew it wouldn't do any good. Zuko had all the power here, and she was trapped. She glanced at the door, her thoughts racing. Could she escape? Could she fight her way out? "Don't even think about it," Zuko said, his voice cutting through her thoughts. "You wouldn't make it 10 feet before the guards caught you. And even if you did, what would happen to Aang and Sokka then?" Katara's shoulders slumped, and she felt a wave of helplessness wash over her. She hated this. She hated him. But she knew he was right. If she tried to escape, Aang and Sokka would pay the price. "Fine," she said finally, her voice low and bitter. "I'll play along. But if you hurt them—" "I won't," Zuko said, his tone calm but firm. "As long as you do exactly as I say, they'll be safe. Of course I will only do those things so that people don't suspect the real reason I want you close to me. In order for the 3 of you to make it out of the Fire Nation alive, I need one of you to always be close to me, and you being a young attractive girl is the most believable thing for a young hot-blooded Fire Nation prince out at sea for years. But if you step out of line, if you tell anyone about this arrangement, then what happens to them, and to you, will be on your head." Katara glared at him, her blue eyes burning with anger. "You're despicable," she said, her voice trembling. Zuko's smirk returned, and he leaned back in his chair. "Maybe," he said. "But I'm also your only hope. So you'll do as I say, and you'll do it without question." Katara clenched her fists, her nails digging into her palms. She wanted to argue, to fight back, but she knew it was pointless. Zuko had her trapped, and there was no way out. "You'll return to the brig now," Zuko said, his tone final. "There's a soldier outside who followed us here. He'll guide you back. And remember, this arrangement stays between us. You'll only mention it to Aang and Sokka. If anyone else finds out, the consequences will be on you." Katara stood up, her chains clinking as she moved. She glared at Zuko one last time, her blue eyes filled with hatred. "I hate you," she said, her voice low and venomous. Zuko's smirk didn't falter. "I know," he said. "But you'll do as I say anyway." Katara turned on her heel and stormed out of the room, her heart pounding and her mind racing. The soldier was waiting outside, his expression neutral as he gestured for her to follow. She walked in silence, her fists clenched and her thoughts a whirlwind of anger and fear. When she reached the brig, Aang and Sokka looked up, their eyes filled with concern. "Katara," Aang said, his voice urgent. "Are you okay?" What did he want? Katara took a deep breath, her hands trembling as she sat down. "We need to talk," she said, her voice low. "But not now, later." Aang and Sokka exchanged a worried glance, but they didn't press her. They could see the turmoil in her eyes, and they knew better than to push. With Katara sitting in the brig, her mind racing as she tried to process what had just happened. The weight of Zuko's demands pressed down on her, and she knew that her life, and the lives of her friends, would never be the same. Chapter 30, The Prince and the Dragon. The upper main deck of Zuko's ship was bathed in the warm glow of the midday sun. The sea stretched out endlessly in all directions, the waves gently lapping against the hull as the ship cut through the water. Zuko stood at the railing, his golden eyes fixed on the horizon, his expression unreadable. Behind him, Iroh approached, his footsteps soft but deliberate. The old man carried a tray with a teapot and 2 cups, the steam rising gently from the spout. "Nephew," Iroh said, his voice calm but tinged with curiosity. "I brought tea. I thought you might like some company." Zuko didn't turn around immediately, his gaze still fixed on the horizon. After a moment, he nodded. "Thank you, Uncle." Iroh set the tray down on a small table nearby and poured 2 cups of tea. He handed one to Zuko, who took it without a word. The two stood in silence for a while, the only sound the gentle creaking of the ship and the distant cries of seabirds. Finally, Iroh broke the silence. "I noticed you took the Water Tribe girl out of the brig earlier," he said, his tone casual but probing. "What are your intentions with her?" Zuko took a sip of his tea, his expression calm but his eyes distant. "My intentions are my own, Uncle," he said, his voice firm. "But you don't need to worry. I know what I'm doing." Iroh raised an eyebrow, his expression thoughtful. "Do you?" he asked, his tone gentle but skeptical. "The girl is not just a prisoner, Zuko. She's a person. And her friends are important to her. If you're planning something, you need to be careful." Zuko's jaw tightened, and he turned to face his uncle. "I know what I'm doing," he repeated, his voice sharper this time. "What I'm doing is for the sake of everyone. You don't know the situation we're going to be walking into when we reach the capital. I need to be prepared." Iroh studied his nephew for a long moment, his expression unreadable. "And what exactly did you learn from Kyoshi?" he asked, his tone calm but insistent. "You've been different since you returned from the island. What happened there?" Zuko took a deep breath, his gaze shifting back to the horizon. He set his teacup down on the railing and crossed his arms over his chest. "I learned that the Avatar is far more powerful than I realized," he said, his voice low and serious. Iroh's brow furrowed, and he took a sip of his tea. "What do you mean?" Zuko hesitated, his mind racing as he tried to find the right words. "Just that no single bender can challenge him head-on," he said finally. "But it's more than that. There are things in this world, Uncle, powerful things. When I was on Kyoshi Island, I was taken to the spirit world by Kyoshi herself. There, I saw just how powerful the Avatar truly is. But even with all that power, there are things in the spirit world that make the Avatar look like a child. And one of those things has its eyes set on this world." Iroh's eyes widened slightly, and he set his teacup down. "What are you talking about, Zuko?" he asked, his voice low and serious. Zuko turned to face his uncle, his golden eyes burning with intensity. "I'm saying that even if I earn back my honor, it will all be for nothing if we don't have the Avatar on our side when that threat eventually comes. That's why I'm doing this. That's why I need to be prepared." Iroh studied his nephew for a long moment, his expression thoughtful. He could see the seriousness in Zuko's eyes, the weight of what he had seen in the spirit world. There was a flicker of something else there too, something that made Iroh's heart ache. Fear. Horror. Whatever Zuko had seen, it had shaken him to his core. "I trust you, Zuko," Iroh said finally, his voice calm but firm. "But I must warn you, no plan survives confrontation with the enemy. It took me a few tries to realize that in my youth." Zuko's brow furrowed, and he tilted his head slightly. "Ba Sing Se?" he asked, his tone curious. Iroh chuckled softly, but there was a sadness in his eyes. "I had a life before Ba Sing Se, you know," he said. "But yes, Ba Sing Se was among the times I was forced to learn that your planning can only take you so far. No matter how well you prepare, the enemy will always find a way to surprise you. You must be ready to adapt." Zuko nodded slowly, his expression thoughtful. Growing up back on Earth, he had learned that lesson the hard way. Life had a way of throwing curveballs, and no amount of planning could prepare you for everything. If you couldn't adapt, all your planning was for nothing. "I understand, Uncle," Zuko said, his voice calm but resolute. "I'll keep that in mind." Iroh smiled faintly and picked up his teacup again. "Good," he said. "Now, let's enjoy this tea while we can. The midday training session will be starting soon, and I expect you to be ready." Zuko nodded, a small smile tugging at the corners of his lips. "Of course, Uncle." The two stood in silence for a while, sipping their tea and watching the sea. The sun was high in the sky now, its warm rays bathing the deck in golden light. The ship sailed on, its course set for the Fire Nation capital, and the challenges that awaited them there. The threat from the spirit world, is it even real? Zuko thought, his gaze fixed on the horizon as he sipped his tea. It was only a lie he used to get Aang and Kyoshi to trust him, but what if it came back to haunt him? What if it becomes real? He frowned, his mind racing. Even if it's not, his uncle's words were still true. The real threats, the ones he'll face in the capital, the ones he'll face beyond, they'll come whether he is ready or not. And he needs to be ready. His grip tightened on the teacup as he thought about the upcoming training session. This is the one I've been waiting for. Lightning Generation. If I can master it, I'll have an edge, something no one will expect. Especially not Azula. Especially not Father. He felt a flicker of anticipation, mixed with a hint of unease. I'll need it sooner than I thought. The capital won't be forgiving, and neither will the enemies waiting for me there. Zuko's jaw tightened as he set the teacup down. No matter what, I can't afford to hesitate. Not anymore. Chapter 31, The Lightning and the Dragon. The sun had begun its slow descent toward the horizon, casting long shadows across the ship's deck as Iroh and Zuko stood in the open training area. The air was thick with the scent of salt and the faint, lingering warmth of the afternoon. Iroh had cleared the space, ensuring no crew members lingered too close. Lightning was not a force to be taken lightly. Zuko stood with his arms crossed, watching as his uncle rolled up his sleeves, his expression uncharacteristically serious. Lightning Generation is not like firebending, Prince Zuko, Iroh began, his voice steady. Fire is passion. It is energy given form through emotion, anger, determination, even joy. But lightning? Lightning is something else entirely. It is pure, cold precision. It is the separation of energies, and then their violent reunion. Zuko frowned, his scientific mind from Earth already dissecting the words. Separation of energies. Positive and negative charges? Iroh took a deep breath and settled into a low stance, his feet planted firmly. His hands moved slowly, deliberately, as if tracing invisible currents in the air. First, you must feel the energy within you, Iroh said, his voice calm but firm. Not as fire, but as something else, something raw and untamed. You must divide it. His left hand drifted outward, palm up, fingers slightly curled, as if drawing something upward. His right hand mirrored the motion but downward, as if pressing against an unseen force. The air around him seemed to hum, the hairs on Zuko's arms standing on end. Yin and yang, Iroh continued. The positive and the negative. You pull them apart, create the space between them. The tension. The potential. Zuko watched, fascinated, as his uncle's hands moved in perfect opposition, his left arm rising while his right descended, the space between them crackling with unseen energy. The motions were fluid, almost meditative, but beneath them was an undeniable power. And then, Iroh said, his voice dropping to a whisper, you bring them together. In one swift motion, his hands snapped toward one another, fingers pointing forward. Crack! A blinding bolt of lightning erupted from Iroh's fingertips, streaking across the sky like a spear of pure white energy. The thunderclap that followed was deafening, shaking the deck beneath their feet. The bolt dissipated into the clouds, leaving behind the acrid scent of ozone and the stunned silence of the crew. Zuko exhaled sharply, his heart pounding. Static discharge. Potential difference. It's like a goddamn capacitor. Iroh lowered his hands, his breathing steady despite the immense energy he had just unleashed. That, he said, is Lightning Generation. Zuko's fingers twitched at his sides. He could see the physics in it, the separation of charges, the sudden release, but knowing and doing were two very different things. Your turn, Iroh said, stepping back. Zuko swallowed hard but nodded. He mimicked his uncle's stance, feet planted, shoulders loose. He closed his eyes for a moment, reaching inward, trying to feel the energy not as fire, but as something else. Something divided. His hands lifted, left palm up, right palm down. He focused, imagining the split, positive and negative, yin and yang. The air around his fingers prickled. Good. Now, bring them together. He snapped his hands forward. Boom! The fire exploded in his face. A violent burst of orange and red erupted between his hands, the force of it sending him flying backward. He crashed into a nearby table, wood splintering beneath him as he hit the deck hard, his ears ringing. Smoke curled from his singed sleeves. Iroh winced, hurrying over. Ah! That was not lightning. Zuko groaned, rubbing his forehead. No kidding. You tried to force it, Iroh said, helping him up. Lightning cannot be forced. It must be allowed. The energy must flow naturally, cold, precise, without emotion. Zuko scowled, brushing ash from his tunic. Easy for you to say. You didn't just get thrown across the deck. Iroh chuckled. No. But I did set my own beard on fire the first time I tried. Zuko blinked. Really? Oh yes. Very embarrassing. Zuko exhaled, shaking out his arms. Fine. Again. Iroh smiled. That's the spirit. Zuko wiped soot from his face, determination burning in his eyes. The lesson was far from over. He rolled his shoulders, still feeling the ache from his crash. He steadied his breathing, pushing past the frustration boiling inside him. His uncle had made it look effortless, but he knew better. Iroh smiled at him, his expression calm but knowing. You are still thinking of it as fire, Prince Zuko. Firebending is power born from will, from passion. But lightning is the energy of the heavens. It is not something you conquer. It is something you guide. Zuko frowned, his mind already racing through what that could mean. Guide? Like a conductor? Like how metal directs electricity along a path. He clenched his fists, trying to translate the wisdom into something logical. Iroh walked closer, raising a hand before him as if feeling the air itself. Lightning exists because the universe seeks balance, he said. The heavens fill with power, and when the tension is too great, it must be released. But that release must have a path. His fingers danced, tracing unseen currents in the air. You must not force the lightning, my nephew. You must become its path. Zuko exhaled slowly. A circuit. He nodded, stepping back into the stance. This time, he didn't grit his teeth. He didn't force his breath into his lungs. Instead, he closed his eyes and imagined himself as a wire, energy flowing from one point to another, unobstructed, guided rather than controlled. His hands rose, left palm up, right palm down. He separated the energy inside him, pushing it apart like the opposing ends of a battery. He could feel the difference now, two distinct forces swirling in his chest, waiting, wanting to reunite. Potential difference. Iroh watched him carefully. Now, bring them together, but do not command it. Let it find its path. Zuko inhaled, then snapped his hands forward. For an instant, he felt it, the sharp, electric bite of something truly different. Not fire. Not heat. Something else entirely. Then, boom! The explosion erupted between his palms, not the clean, precise strike of lightning but a violent detonation of energy. The force hurled him backward, slamming him into the metal wall of the ship with a deafening clang. Pain jolted through his spine. He slumped to the floor, smoke curling from his fingertips. His ears rang, his vision swam. His ribs ached from the impact. He screamed in the absolute agony he felt. Iroh let out a deep sigh. Ah! He strolled forward and crouched beside Zuko, who groaned as he pulled himself up. You almost had it. Zuko scowled, rubbing his sore shoulder. Felt more like it had me. Iroh chuckled. That is not untrue. He helped Zuko sit properly, glancing at the soot stains on his clothes. The problem is clear now. Oh, please tell me, Zuko muttered, stretching his arm with a grimace. You are still thinking like a firebender, Iroh said simply. You think you must direct it with strength, with control. You must surrender to it and provide the way. Your mind has gotten to used to forcing fire that is still hard for you. But that is not the way. He motioned toward the sky. Lightning is not a soldier following orders. It is a river flowing toward the sea. It seeks the easiest path to balance. You are still forcing the energy instead of guiding it. Zuko stared at his hands. He had felt it for a moment, the charge, the tension. But he had still tried to make it obey him. That's why it exploded. He didn't let it flow. He disrupted the circuit. He didn't like the idea of surrendering to it and merely becoming a guide. He clenched his fingers, the memory of the energy still tingling in his nerves. So, I just have to let it move on its own? Iroh nodded. Yes. Like water through a stream, like wind through the trees. You are not the master of the lightning. You are its guide. Zuko breathed deeply. He was close. He could feel it. One more time. He rose to his feet, steadying himself. The pain in his back didn't matter. He turned to face the open sky again, eyes sharp, focused. Iroh stepped back, watching. Zuko exhaled and lifted his hands. Separate the charge. Feel the tension. Do not command it, become the conduit. He moved. The energy stirred. Chapter 32, The Underestimated Prince. The evening sky burned crimson over the training grounds as Commander Zhao stood, arms folded, observing the line of Fire Nation soldiers before him. The heat of the sun was fading, but the heat of battle was only just beginning. Again, he ordered. The soldiers, 6 in total, assumed their stances, flames crackling around their fists. They had been sparring with their commander for nearly an hour, but none had landed a decisive hit. Zhao, ever the tactician, had spent years refining his combat skills. His firebending was not just powerful, it was precise, calculated, ruthless. One of the soldiers hesitated before stepping forward. Commander, with all due respect, you've been dodging and deflecting all of our attacks. If this were a real battle, you wouldn't have the luxury of fighting one-on-one. Zhao smirked. Then stop hesitating and fight me as if I were your enemy. Unless, of course, you'd rather continue losing. The soldiers exchanged glances before nodding. Without another word, they spread out, encircling their commander. Flames surged to life, lighting up the darkening sky. Zhao widened his stance, preparing himself. Then they attacked. Flames erupted from all sides, converging on him in a relentless assault. The air heated rapidly as fireballs streaked toward Zhao, their combined force enough to incinerate anything caught in the center. Zhao dodged the first few, weaving through the barrage with practiced ease, but the soldiers adjusted, coordinating their strikes. Streams of fire twisted together, forming a swirling vortex, a maelstrom of heat and destruction, designed to trap him inside. Zhao's eyes gleamed. Good. They're learning. But they were still thinking like soldiers, not strategists. As the fiery storm closed in, Zhao inhaled sharply and took a step forward. Then, in a single fluid motion, he spun. His arms shot outward, and from his fingertips erupted a spiraling vortex of fire. The maelstrom's flames were drawn toward him, sucked into the centrifugal force of his movement. The more the soldiers fed into their attack, the stronger Zhao's firestorm became, twisting and roaring like a living beast. Then, boom! A ring of fire exploded outward, expanding in a fiery arc. The soldiers had no time to react. The sheer force of Zhao's counter sent them hurtling backward, landing in scattered heaps a few meters away, coughing and gasping from the shockwave. Zhao came to a stop, lowering his arms as embers danced around him. Silence followed. Then he scoffed. Relying solely on overwhelming firepower? Foolish. He paced in front of them, hands clasped behind his back. Your strategy had potential, but brute force alone won't always win battles. Fire is destruction, yes, but it is also a tool. A weapon of precision. If you attack without thinking, you'll burn yourselves before you burn your enemies. The soldier sat up, panting, taking in his words. Zhao crossed his arms. Sometimes, you have to actually use your brain. Before he could continue, a voice cut through the night air. Commander Zhao. He turned to see a young soldier approaching at a brisk pace, his expression tense. The soldier saluted. Sir, an urgent report has just arrived from the Fire Lord. All ships have been notified. Zhao narrowed his eyes. Well? What does it say? The soldier took a breath. It says that Prince Zuko has captured the Avatar and will be returning to the Fire Nation capital. The Fire Lord has ordered that his banishment be suspended, allowing him to re-enter Fire Nation waters. For a moment, Zhao simply stared. Then, he what? The soldiers behind him stiffened as Zhao's voice cut through the air like a blade. Zhao's mind raced. Captured the Avatar? So soon? How? His thoughts flashed back to the last time he saw the boy. Zuko had been desperate, humiliated from his Agni Kai, barely more than an exiled prince clinging to a hopeless mission. And yet, Zhao's expression darkened. Unless... A realization struck him like a fist. The prince had already captured the Avatar when he came to the base, Zhao muttered, half to himself. He clenched his jaw. His plan was ingenious. He fooled all of us. His gaze flickered to the soldier. Tell me, his crew, did they know? The soldier hesitated. It's possible. If they did, then they must have lied to us. Why would they lie? Zhao growled. His mind churned with possibilities. And the Agni Kai? What purpose did that serve? A second soldier, still breathless from the fight, spoke up. Perhaps the prince didn't want anyone interfering. If we had known he had the Avatar, we might have tried to take him for ourselves. Another added, it also explains why he went to Kyoshi Island. It was all a ruse. He was making it seem like he was still chasing the Avatar while he already had him. Zhao clenched his fists. It all made sense. Zuko had played them. He had outmaneuvered them. His expression hardened. It would appear that Prince Zuko had matured in the time he spent at sea. He exhaled sharply, turning away. That report is for those in Fire Nation waters, he said coolly. Not for us. With that, he strode toward the barracks, disappearing into the shadows of the fortress. The hallways of the base were dimly lit, flickering torches casting elongated shadows against the steel walls. Zhao's boots echoed through the corridors as he made his way to his office, his thoughts still swirling. Once inside, he sat at his desk and reached for a scroll. Unrolling it, he dipped his brush into ink and began to write. Dear Master, I write to you with the most unfortunate news. As I am writing this, I have received a report that Prince Zuko has indeed captured the Avatar. His return to the capital was unforeseen, given how excited you were when he first discovered the Avatar. I write this letter to inform you that I will be returning to the Fire Nation myself. If the prince regains his status and becomes the heir, then our plans for Princess Azula will have to be altered somewhat. It would appear that the prince has grown and matured in ways none of us anticipated. With the Avatar involved, we must assume that the Order will soon make a play. As their antithesis, I suggest we make a counter. From your loyal servant, Commander Zhao. He rolled the letter neatly and sealed it. Then, without hesitation, he rose from his chair and exited the room. His steps were quick, purposeful, as he navigated the corridors until he reached his private aviary. Inside, several messenger hawks rested on their perches, waiting. Zhao approached one of them, a strong, well-trained bird, and tied the letter securely to its leg. With a sharp flick of his wrist, he sent it soaring into the night sky. He watched it disappear into the darkness. Then, with a smirk, he murmured, "You will not ruin our plans, Prince Zuko." The flames of ambition burned in his eyes. the battle was far from over. Chapter 33, The Return of the Exiled Prince. The Fire Lord's war chamber was a vast, imposing space, its walls adorned with intricate carvings of dragons and ancient firebending masters. The flickering glow of torches cast long shadows across the obsidian floor, and at the center of it all stood Fire Lord Ozai, his crimson armor glinting under the firelight. He stood with his hands behind his back, gazing at the massive war map laid out before him. Miniature figures of Fire Nation fleets and Earth Kingdom strongholds were arranged across the board, each one representing a campaign in motion. His generals stood at attention, their expressions disciplined, awaiting his next decree. Ozai's gaze flickered toward the entrance as the heavy doors swung open. A single figure stepped into the room, Princess Azula. She moved with effortless grace, her golden eyes gleaming as she approached. "Father," she said smoothly, inclining her head. Ozai did not look up from the map. "Azula, I have something important to discuss with you," she said, stepping closer. "The entire capital is preparing for your brother's return," Ozai replied, still focused on the board. "We can discuss this another time." Azula's lips tightened. "I think you'll want to hear this now." Ozai finally lifted his gaze, sharp and calculating. What could be so urgent that it cannot wait until after Zuko's arrival? Azula's fingers twitched slightly, but she kept her tone measured. "It's about Zuko." Ozai exhaled, closing his eyes briefly before turning his full attention to her. "Your brother has done what even my best generals could not, he has captured the Avatar. His banishment is suspended, and he will return as a prince. That is the reality of the situation." Azula's eyes narrowed. "And you trust that he did this entirely on his own?" Ozai raised an eyebrow. "You sound jealous, Azula." She let out a short, humorless laugh. "Jealous? Of Zuko?" She tilted her head, golden eyes glinting. "No, father. I'm suspicious. Zuko somehow manages to capture the most elusive enemy the Fire Nation has ever known? And we're just supposed to believe it?" Ozai's expression remained unreadable. He succeeded where others failed. Azula stepped forward, her voice carrying an edge. "Or he lied." Silence settled in the chamber. Even the generals exchanged cautious glances. Ozai studied her carefully, then spoke, voice calm but firm. "You've always been the most cunning of my children, Azula. But do not let your mind turn to baseless paranoia. Whatever Zuko has done, he has done in service to the Fire Nation." Azula crossed her arms. "Or in service to himself. Did you consider that? Maybe this was all a trick. Maybe he's just pretending to be the dutiful son." Ozai smirked slightly. "And why would he do that? Why would he come back, knowing that we, have spent years ruling without him? What does Zuko stand to gain?" Azula's jaw tightened. "He wants to be heir again." Ozai chuckled. "Ah. And that is what worries you, isn't it?" She shot him a glare. "What worries me is that you're willing to take him back without question. You're giving him what he's always wanted just because he stumbled his way into capturing the Avatar." Ozai's voice darkened. "He succeeded. That is what matters." Azula's nails dug into her arms. "So you'll just ignore the fact that he could be deceiving you? Why are you so certain of deception?" Ozai asked, tilting his head. "Do you truly believe Zuko is capable of such strategy?" Azula scoffed. "He never was before. But what if exile changed him? What if he's learned to be more cunning?" She smirked slightly, but there was an underlying tension in her voice. "What if he's learned to think more like me?" Ozai considered this. "And if he has? Then he has finally grown into something worthy of the Fire Nation." Azula's eyes flickered with something unreadable, something dangerously close to frustration. "You always do this," she muttered, shaking her head. "Do what?" "Pretend you're impartial," she snapped. "Pretend you're just weighing the facts. But the truth is, you've already made your decision. You always favored him. Ozai's eyes hardened. Careful, Azula. She took a slow breath, regaining her composure. I just don't understand why you trust him more than me. Ozai watched her for a long moment before stepping closer. Trust? He chuckled darkly. I don't trust either of you. I only trust power. And right now, your brother has proven himself useful. That is all that matters. Azula studied him carefully, her expression unreadable. Then, after a beat, she smirked. I suppose we'll see just how useful he really is. Ozai turned back to the war map. Yes. We will. Azula lingered for a moment longer before turning sharply on her heel and exiting the chamber. As the doors shut behind her, Ozai's gaze remained fixed on the map, but his thoughts lingered on her words. Perhaps exile had changed Zuko after all. The Fire Nation capital burned like a jewel set against the darkening sky. Towers of volcanic stone clawed toward the heavens, their crimson banners rippling in the evening breeze. Molten metal arches glowed with the last vestiges of the sun's light, and the city streets, paved with polished obsidian, led to the grand harbor, where an immense gathering had formed. Nobles and dignitaries crowded the docks, their embroidered robes gleaming under the flickering torches. Generals, their chests adorned with medals of conquest, stood in disciplined formation, flanked by high-ranking officials murmuring amongst themselves. Every family of importance had sent a representative, their hushed voices a mixture of reverence and barely restrained anticipation. At the heart of this spectacle, seated on a raised obsidian throne inlaid with veins of gold, sat Fire Lord Ozai. The supreme ruler of the Fire Nation was a vision of absolute authority. His blood-red cloak draped over the imposing armor of a warlord, and his golden eyes, alight with an inner fire, surveyed the harbor with quiet scrutiny. His expression was impassive, yet there was no mistaking the weight of his presence. He was the Fire Nation's living embodiment of dominion, its architect of war. Beside him, standing in a stance of poised regality, was Princess Azula. Her ensemble, crimson and black, tailored to perfection, accentuated the sharp angles of her face. A single golden hairpiece held her raven locks in place, though a few stray strands framed her calculating expression. Unlike the murmuring nobles, her silence was absolute. The whispers of the crowd barely registered to her. She had no interest in their gossip, nor in their awe at the spectacle before them. No, her focus remained fixed on what was to come. He is finally returning. A murmur rippled through the nobles as a ship loomed into view beyond the misty harbor. It was no ordinary vessel. The ship cut through the waves with silent majesty, its hull an interplay of silvered steel and darkness. The very sight of it stirred unease. This was the same ship that had carried Prince Zuko into exile. A deep clank reverberated through the docks as the anchor was released, and moments later, the ship's ornate bow creaked open. From its depths, a procession of 12 firebenders emerged in perfect formation. The disciplined warriors formed two columns, their controlled embers flickering at their fingertips in ceremonial salute. Their presence was both a mark of honor and an unspoken warning. Loyalty to the throne was not lightly given. Then came the moment all had waited for. From the darkened interior of the ship, a lone figure stepped forth. General Iroh. His steps were slow, measured, carrying the weight of a man who had seen both victory and loss in equal measure. Though his presence was unmistakably regal, there was something almost solemn about him. His silvered hair was tied back, crimson robes a faded remnant of former glory. Murmurs broke out at the sight of him, respectful, nostalgic. The Dragon of the West returns, a noble whispered. The rightful Fire Lord, another whispered. The prodigy of prodigies, a third added. But Iroh was not the reason they had gathered. And then, Prince Zuko emerged. The crowd inhaled as one. The young prince strode down the gangway, his posture straight, his movements unshaken. His golden eyes, shadowed with both defiance and purpose, swept across the sea of faces before him. The scar marring one side of his face only accentuated the hardened resolve in his expression. His uniform bore the sigils of the royal family, yet the fabric was worn from battle. This was no triumphant hero returning in splendor, this was a warrior who had clawed his way back from disgrace, a prince who had been cast out and had returned bearing the one thing that could rewrite his destiny. He paused, lifting a gloved hand in salute. The gesture was both an acknowledgement and a challenge. Yet he was not alone. Trailing just behind him, half-dragged, was a smaller figure cloaked in heavy fabric. There had concealed most of their features, but there was no mistaking the reluctant gait, nor the firm grip Zuko had on their arm. Azula's gaze sharpened. So, it's true. She could already feel the shift in the atmosphere as Zuko advanced toward the throne. As he reached the halfway point, his gaze flickered to the side, locking onto hers. For the briefest of moments, a glimmer of something sharp and mischievous danced in his eyes, a silent provocation. Azula's lips barely moved, but her expression spoke volumes. "Don't test me, brother." The firelight flickered between them, two reflections of the same royal bloodline standing on opposite sides of a widening rift. Then Zuko turned back toward the throne, his voice ringing out over the gathered assembly. "Father, generals, noble clans of the Fire Nation, I have returned. And as promised, I have brought a gift." A wave of murmurs swept through the crowd. Even the impassive Fire Lord seemed to lean forward slightly. Zuko took a single step forward, his voice unwavering. For 100 years, the Fire Nation has hunted one figure. The one person who could stand against our destiny of conquest. The one who has evaded our grasp, until now. The tension thickened. Azula's gaze darted between her father and Zuko, watching, reading the flickers of expression that passed through the Fire Lord's golden eyes. Zuko gripped the edge of the hood and, in a swift motion, yanked it down. A collective gasp rippled through the crowd. There, standing in chains, was a boy no older than 12. His arrow tattoos, glowing softly, marked him as the last of his kind. His eyes, wide and defiant, scanned the gathered nobles, his young face a mixture of trepidation and quiet determination. Even the hardened warriors among the Fire Nation ranks could not suppress their astonishment. The Avatar had been caught. A thunderous roar erupted from the crowd, some in sheer triumph, others in disbelief. Firelight flickered across gleaming armor and ceremonial robes as nobles whispered fervently amongst themselves. The weight of history itself seemed to shift in that moment. From his throne, Fire Lord Ozai finally spoke. His voice, deep and measured, cut through the chaos. "You have done well, Zuko." There was no immediate outward sign of pride, no grand display of approval, but there was something in the way Ozai regarded his son now, something that had not been there before. Zuko, standing tall beneath the weight of countless gazes, bowed his head slightly. Azula, standing beside her father, tilted her head, watching. Calculating. He did it. But the game isn't over. As the Avatar lifted his chin defiantly, his presence on Fire Nation soil now undeniable, the balance of the world had begun to shift. The exiled prince had returned. And he had brought with him the key to the Fire Nation's victory, or its downfall. Chapter 34, Tensions in the Hall. The echoes of triumphant cheers still lingered in the air as the gathered nobility, generals, and high-ranking officials surged forward, eager to greet the Fire Nation's long-exiled prince. The energy in the atmosphere was palpable, a mixture of celebration, intrigue, and barely restrained curiosity. Zuko descended from the dock's raised platform, his movements measured, his mind razor-sharp as he approached the first line of waiting dignitaries. The moment felt surreal. Just days ago, he had been little more than an outcast, and now he was standing on the steps of power once again, bearing the single greatest trophy the Fire Nation had sought for a century. Despite the weight of expectation pressing down on him, his expression remained composed, his eyes scanning the sea of familiar faces. The first to greet him was General Bujing, an elder statesman with a severe expression, his high cheekbones casting sharp shadows beneath the glow of the surrounding torches. His crimson and gold uniform was adorned with the insignia of countless campaigns, battles fought and won in the Earth Kingdom. Prince Zuko, Bujing greeted, inclining his head slightly. His tone was measured, professional, though there was an unmistakable note of respect. Welcome home. I must admit, I had my doubts about your pursuit, but you have proven yourself more capable than we expected. Zuko met his gaze evenly. Thank you, General. It was not an easy hunt, but I learned that persistence can overcome even the most elusive prey. Bujing smirked faintly. Indeed. Your return has stirred quite the conversation among the high ranks. You have given the Fire Nation an advantage we have long sought. Beside him stood General Shainu, a broad-shouldered warrior with a deep scar running across his chin. Unlike Bujing, who carried himself with the cold calculation of a strategist, Shainu had the presence of a battlefield commander, his sharp eyes measuring Zuko with scrutiny. You've changed, Shainu remarked, his voice a low rumble. Zuko tilted his head. For better or worse? Shainu chuckled. For the better, I'd say. Before, you were a boy with a title. Now, you look like a man who's fought for his place in the world. Zuko nodded, absorbing the words. Though the reception was formal, he knew these men were watching, testing him, weighing whether he was truly worthy of standing among them again. As he moved further down the line, he was met with bows from nobles, measured greetings from council members, and whispers exchanged in the shadows. He did not let his guard down, not even for a moment. Then, at last, he reached the towering throne where his father sat. Fire Lord Ozai. The reception hall, though open to the night air, felt suffocatingly warm in his presence. The flickering torches cast his shadow long and imposing, a silent reminder of the power he wielded. Zuko came to a halt before the throne, inhaling deeply. Then, with perfect composure, he knelt on one knee and bowed low. Father, he said, his voice steady, I have returned. For a long, suffocating moment, there was silence. Then Ozai rose from his throne. The movement was slow, deliberate. He descended the steps, his armored boots clinking against the obsidian floor as he came to stand before his son. From this close, the Fire Lord's presence was overwhelming, the sheer intensity of his gaze, the aura of dominance that radiated from him. You have done well, Zuko, Ozai said at last. It was not warm. It was not affectionate. It was a statement of fact. Zuko lifted his head slightly, peering up at his father. Thank you, Fire Lord. Ozai studied him, golden eyes searching for weakness. You have fulfilled your mission and brought honor to the Fire Nation. You may once again stand among us. Zuko rose to his feet, the weight of those words settling in. His banishment had not been lifted entirely, not yet, but this was the first step. The Fire Lord took a step back, his attention shifting toward the restrained figure still standing behind Zuko. And this, Ozai continued, his voice carrying across the gathered nobility, is the Avatar. The crowd murmured as Ozai regarded the young Airbender with something akin to curiosity. The boy looked up at him, defiant yet wary, his tattooed head catching the firelight. Zuko remained silent, watching the moment unfold. Then, finally, Ozai turned back to his son. Your place here will be determined by your continued actions. Do not mistake this welcome for absolute restoration. Zuko inclined his head slightly. I understand. For a long moment, Ozai said nothing. Then, almost imperceptibly, he nodded. Come, the Fire Lord commanded, turning toward the palace interior. We have much to discuss. As Zuko followed, he could feel the eyes of the entire capital upon him. His return was not the end of his struggle. It was only the beginning. The grand banquet hall was alive with the clatter of dishes, the murmur of nobles, and the flickering glow of firelight dancing across the walls. Servants wove through the crowd, bearing platters of roasted meats, steaming rice, and spiced wines. The air was thick with the scent of saffron and charred delicacies, a feast befitting the Fire Nation's elite. As the procession moved inward, Ozai lingered near the entrance, his gaze locking onto his brother. Iroh stood apart, his expression unreadable, his hands tucked into the sleeves of his robes. The two men regarded one another in silence, Ozai's golden eyes sharp as daggers, Iroh as calm but unwavering. Brother, Ozai said, his voice low. You've returned as well. Iroh inclined his head slightly. A family reunion is a rare occasion. I would not miss it. Ozai's lips curled into a thin smile. How fortunate for us all. There was no warmth in the exchange, only the weight of years of tension, of betrayal, of a throne once denied. Ozai turned away first, striding toward the high table without another word. Iroh exhaled slowly, then followed at a measured pace. Meanwhile, Zuko had found his target. Azula stood near the edge of the hall, her arms crossed, her sharp eyes scanning the room with calculated disinterest. She hadn't bothered to greet him earlier, typical. But Zuko wasn't about to let her slip away so easily. "Long time, Azuzu," he called, using the old teasing nickname from their childhood. Her head snapped toward him, her glare lethal. "Don't start with me." He grinned, undeterred. "No welcome back hug?" Before she could react, he stepped forward and wrapped his arms around her, pulling her into an embrace that was just a little too tight, a little too lingering. His hands slid down her back, fingers tracing the curve of her spine before settling on her waist, then lower, squeezing her buttocks with deliberate boldness. Azula stiffened, her breath hitching in shock. "What are you doing?" she hissed, shoving him away with a burst of force. Zuko merely smirked, his golden eyes glinting with something dark. "I guess no love for your big brother." She wiped her hands on her robes as if brushing off filth. "You're disgusting." "Come," he said, undaunted. "You'll be sitting next to me." For a fleeting moment, Azula hesitated. Behind his playful tone, behind that perfect, practiced smile, she saw it, the ruthlessness, the hunger for control. It mirrored her own. And that unsettled her more than his touch. Zuko didn't wait for a reply. He seized her wrist and pulled her along, his grip unyielding. Azula's jaw clenched, but she didn't resist. Not here, not in front of everyone. At the far end of the hall, Aang sat under heavy guard, his wrists bound in chains. A dozen firebenders surrounded him, their eyes never leaving the Avatar. The boy picked at his food, his expression weary but alert. Zuko paid him no mind. His focus was on the high table, where Ozai had already taken his seat at the center, the place of highest honor. Iroh settled to his right, his face a mask of quiet observation. Azula moved toward Ozai's left, her usual spot, but before she could sit, Ozai raised a hand. "Zuko," he said, "you will sit beside me tonight." The hall fell silent. Azula's fingers twitched at her sides, her nails digging into her palms. The slight was deliberate, a public reminder of her sudden displacement. Zuko bowed his head. "Of course, father." As he took his seat, he glanced at Azula, patting the empty chair beside him. "Sit next to me," he said, his tone light, as if offering a favor. Azula's eyes burned, but she sat, her posture rigid. The message was clear, Zuko was back, and he was playing to win. Ozai raised his goblet, the signal for the feast to begin. As the first course was served, Zuko leaned back in his chair, his gaze flickering between his father, his sister, and the Avatar in chains. The game had only just begun. Chapter 35, Fire Lord's Decree. The hall fell into a hush as Fire Lord Ozai rose from his seat, his presence commanding absolute silence. Every noble, general, and dignitary turned their full attention toward the throne, their expressions a mix of reverence and anticipation. Even the clatter of dishes ceased, leaving only the crackle of torches to fill the air. Ozai's voice, deep and resonant, carried across the chamber with effortless authority. "For over a century, the Fire Nation has waged a war of destiny," he began, his golden eyes sweeping over the assembled elite. "A war begun by my grandfather, Fire Lord Sozin, and carried forth by his successors. A war that I intend to see finished." A murmur of approval rippled through the crowd, fists tightening in silent fervor. Ozai allowed the moment to settle before continuing. "But even the greatest flames must be tended by worthy hands. And so, it is with certainty that I declare, should my time in this world come to an end, the Fire Nation will have a ruler strong enough to see our victory secured." His gaze shifted to Zuko, who sat perfectly still, his face unreadable. 1 week from today, Ozai announced, there will be a ceremony in the capital's Grand Plaza. There, before the eyes of our people and the spirits themselves, Prince Zuko shall be formally named Crown Prince of the Fire Nation, my heir, and your future Fire Lord. The declaration sent a shockwave through the hall. Azula's fingers curled around the edge of the table, her knuckles whitening. Iroha's brow lifted slightly, though his expression remained inscrutable. Zuko, for his part, betrayed nothing. He simply inclined his head in acknowledgement, as if this had always been inevitable. Ozai raised his goblet, the dark wine within catching the firelight like blood. Now, a toast, he commanded, to the return of the future of the Fire Nation. Every guest in the hall mirrored the gesture, their glasses lifted high. I give you, for the first time in 3 years, Prince Zuko of the Fire Nation. Prince Zuko, the assembly echoed, their voices thunderous. The wine was drunk, the moment sealed. As Ozai sat back down, the feast resumed in full force, music swelling, plates refilled, laughter and whispered schemes weaving through the smoke-laden air. But beneath the veneer of celebration, the currents of ambition and resentment churned. Zuko took a slow sip from his own cup, his eyes meeting Azula's over the rim. She smiled at him, sharp and venomous. He smiled back. The game, after all, was far from over. The hall buzzed with murmurs and whispers, the news of Zuko's return and impending coronation as Crown Prince sending ripples of intrigue through the gathered nobility. But Zuko paid them no mind. His attention was fixed on one person, Azula. She shifted uncomfortably under his gaze. Would you stop looking at me like that? She snapped, her voice laced with irritation. Zuko merely smiled, slow and deliberate. I miss my little sister, he said, his voice dripping with false warmth. And how you've grown these past 3 years. Azula's eyes narrowed, but before she could retort, Ozai cut in. Indeed, Azula has grown, the Fire Lord mused, his golden eyes assessing his son. But so have you, Zuko. You've matured. And from what I've seen, your bending has improved significantly. Zuko inclined his head. Uncle has been helping me along, he said, gesturing toward Iroh, who sat quietly observing the exchange. Iroh chuckled softly. It is not wrong to say he has become one of the most powerful firebenders around. Azula's lips curled into a smirk. Oh? Then why did he lose against Commander Zhao in an Agni Kai just a few days ago? The table fell silent. Ozai's gaze sharpened. What is she talking about, Zuko? Zuko didn't react immediately. Instead, he turned his smile toward Azula, his eyes glinting with something darkly amused. He gave her a subtle nod, as if daring her to continue. Azula, relishing the chance to undermine him, obliged. Zuko challenged Commander Zhao to an Agni Kai because he supposedly let the Avatar escape, she explained, her voice dripping with mock concern. And he lost. Zhao is the commander of a naval base in the southern Earth Kingdom provinces. Hardly a worthy opponent for a prince of the Fire Nation. Ozai's expression darkened. Is this true? Zuko's smile widened, but there was no warmth in it. So you are keeping tabs on me, little Azuzu? Stop calling me that. Azula hissed, her composure cracking for the briefest moment. Then, like a snuff flame, Zuko's smile vanished. His face turned cold, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper as he addressed his father. I never let the Avatar escape. The air around the table grew heavy. Even the nearby nobles leaned in, straining to hear. What happened at the naval base, Zuko continued, his tone measured, was that I didn't trust Zhao, or anyone else, to ensure the Avatar's safe transport to the Fire Nation. So I had my crew leak false information, that Prince Zuko had found the Avatar but let him slip away. Azula's smirk faltered. I wanted Zhao to underestimate me, Zuko said, his voice low and deliberate. So I challenged him to an Agni Kai. I intended to lose, my pride nearly stopped me, but in the end, Zhao proved himself a capable firebender. He defeated me with lightning. A murmur ran through the crowd. Fortunately for me, Zuko continued, his lips curling into a predatory grin, Zhao's victory only made him more arrogant. He stopped questioning whether the Avatar was still on my ship. He stopped seeing me as a threat. The silence that followed was deafening. Even Ozai seemed momentarily taken aback. After a long pause, the Fire Lord exhaled slowly. I was right. You have grown. Azula's fingers tightened around her chopsticks. This wasn't the Zuko she remembered, the hot-headed, easily manipulated boy she could toy with at will. This Zuko was calculating. Dangerous. Then, from among the gathered generals, a voice cut through the tension. If the Avatar disappeared a century ago, why does he still look like a child? The question hung in the air, unanswered. The hall held its breath. All eyes, Ozai's piercing gold, Azula's sharp amber, the noble's curious stares, locked onto Zuko as he leaned back in his seat, swirling his wine with deliberate calm. The Avatar didn't age, Zuko began, his voice cutting through the silence, because he was never dead. He was frozen. A ripple of murmurs spread through the crowd. Even Ozai's fingers stilled around his goblet. A short time before Fire Lord Sozin attacked the air temples, Zuko continued, the Avatar ran away. He was just a child, scared, selfish, unwilling to bear the weight of his duty. His lip curled slightly. He cared more about what he wanted than what the world needed against the Fire Nation. The nobles exchanged glances. Some muttered under their breaths, coward, weakness, a failure of destiny. Zuko ignored them. After tracking his movements and questioning those who knew him, I learned he was caught in a storm near the South Pole. His own power saved him, encased him in ice, untouched by time. He paused, letting the weight of the revelation sink in. He was only free days before my arrival at the Southern Water Tribe. The rest, you know. The murmurs crescendoed. A century in ice? The Avatar cheated death? How did the prince uncover this? Across the hall, Aang stiffened in his chains. His wide eyes locked onto Zuko, his chest tightening. None of it, had been ripped from him or his friends in interrogation. No torture, no tricks. Zuko already knew it all and just made up the stories for them. He knows too much. Aang's fingers curled into fists. Victor's warnings came back to his mind. Zuko is not what he seems. Trust nothing of what he does as Zuko, but think of it as a facade he has to play. The prince's mask of arrogance, his casual cruelty, it was all a performance. And this? This was proof. He thought. Ozai studied his son with newfound intensity. You learned all this without breaking him? Zuko smirked. The Avatar is a child, father. Children talk. Especially to those they think are harmless. His gaze flicked to Azula, a silent challenge. See how deep my game goes. Azula's nails bit into her palms. This wasn't just strategy, it was dominance. Zuko had outplayed everyone, even their father. The general who'd spoken earlier shook his head in disbelief. 100 years, and he emerges unchanged? It defies nature. Yet it serves us, Ozai declared, silencing the room. A relic of a bygone era, unearthed just in time to witness his people's extinction. His smile was a blade. Poetic. The nobles raised their glasses in grim agreement. Aang didn't drink. He didn't blink. He stared at Zuko, and for the first time, he saw him, truly saw him. The victor behind Zuko. The prince's golden eyes met his. Just for a second. Then Zuko looked away, laughing at some noble's jest, the perfect picture of a prodigal son. But Aang knew now. The monster in the room was Ozai. Chapter 36, The Prince and the Prisoner. Water. Earth. Fire. Air. Long ago, the four nations lived together in harmony. Then, everything changed when the Fire Nation attacked. Only the Avatar, master of all four elements, could stop them. But when the world needed him most, he vanished. Zuko's voice was low, almost reverent, as he recited the words to Katara. She stood in the corner of his lavish chambers, dressed in a flowing red Fire Nation gown, silk clinging to her curves, gold embroidery glinting in the candlelight. The dress was beautiful, but it wasn't hers. Just like this room, this palace, this life, none of it was hers. She crossed her arms. "Do you know who those words remind me of?" he asked, staring into the flickering flames of the hearth. "Your mother?" Katara guessed, her voice tight. Zuko turned, his golden eyes locking onto hers. "You, actually." A faint, unreadable smile touched his lips. "And hopefully, one day, I can tell you why, and who spoke them to me." Katara's brow furrowed. "What am I doing here, Zuko?" "The banquet's over. Everyone's left. You don't need to keep me around anymore." He stepped closer, his voice dropping to a whisper. "Remember our deal, Katara. You stay with me, and nothing happens to your brother." Before she could retort, his hand rose, a single finger pressing against his lips in a silent shush. Then he was in front of her, so close she could feel his breath on her skin, warm and tinged with the scent of spiced wine. Her cheeks burned. Her pulse hammered in her throat. "Are you willing to admit how much you've missed me, Azula?" he suddenly called out, loud enough to startle her. In one swift motion, he reached past Katara and shoved open the door beside her, revealing Azula standing there, poised as if she'd just arrived. Behind her, two familiar faces lingered, Mai, her bored expression unchanged, and Ty Lee, bouncing on her toes with forced cheer. Zuko's gaze flickered over them. Mai, his childhood infatuation, looked as disinterested as ever, her dark eyes half-lidded. Ty Lee, meanwhile, was all smiles, her ample chest straining against her tight acrobat's top. His eyes lingered there for a heartbeat too long, his fingers twitching with the absurd impulse to touch. "Well, what do we have here?" Azula's voice sliced through his thoughts. Zuko ignored her for a beat, nodding to the others. "Long time," he said flatly. "Welcome back, Prince Zuko." Ty Lee chirped, though her usual pep was strained. "Sorry we couldn't greet you at the reception." Mai merely shrugged. "You look alive." Zuko barely suppressed an eye roll. The Olden might have swooned over her apathy. Now, she was about as exciting as wet sand. Azula's sharp eyes darted to Katara. "Who is she?" "A girl I took from the Southern Water Tribe," Zuko said, shrugging. "Growing up at sea, a man has needs. She takes care of those needs." Katara's face burned with humiliation. "What needs?" Ty Lee blinked innocently. "My side." "Sexual needs," she muttered, as if explaining to a child. Azula's lips curled. "So you've got yourself a WH." Crack. Zuko moved faster than thought. His hand snapped out, catching Katara's wrist just before her palm could connect with Azula's face. The air between them sizzled with tension. For a heartbeat, no one breathed. Then, whoosh! Azula's fury erupted in a blast of blue fire, aimed directly at Katara's heart. Zuko yanked Katara against his chest, spinning them both out of harm's way as the flames scorched the wall behind them. "You dare touch royalty?" Azula shrieked, lunging. "Back off, Azula!" Zuko's roar was a physical force, a torrent of fire exploding from his mouth like a dragon's wrath. The flames forced Azula to stagger back, her eyes wide with shock. In the aftermath, Zuko gently lowered Katara onto the bed, his hands surprisingly tender as he checked her for burns. "Are you all right?" he murmured, his voice softer than she'd ever heard it. Katara stared up at him, stunned. The concern in his eyes was real. The way his fingers brushed her arm, careful, almost protective, it wasn't an act. Why? Why did he care? One moment, he was parading her as a conquest. The next, shielding her like she mattered. Was this what Aang meant? Was this the truth behind the mask? Then, like a snuff candle, the warmth vanished. Zuko stood, his back rigid as he faced Azula. What do you want? His voice was ice and venom, dripping with a killing intent so palpable it made even Azula hesitate. The air turned to knives. The aura radiating from him was suffocating, a predator's stillness, a promise of violence held back by sheer will. For the first time, Azula hesitated. Just how could he have changed so much? Ty Lee, ever the peacemaker, broke the silence with a nervous laugh. We actually had a message from your father, she chirped, though her usual cheer was strained. He thought, since you seem to have missed your sister so much, it would be best if we delivered the news. And since we didn't get a chance to greet you earlier, we, decided to join her. Mai, leaning against the doorframe with her usual disinterest, added nothing. Zuko's gaze never left Azula. What is the message? Azula exhaled through her nose, her composure sliding back into place like a well-worn mask. Father wants to go over ceremony details tomorrow in the war chamber, she said, her voice clipped. He also said your first-hand knowledge of the Southern Earth Kingdom provinces would be invaluable. They're preparing to escalate operations there. Her tone was so detached, so professional, it was as if the near-fatal confrontation moments ago had never happened. Without another word, Azula turned on her heel and strode out, her cape flaring behind her. Mai followed without a backward glance, but Ty Lee lingered for a heartbeat, her eyes darting between Zuko and Katara. There was something unreadable in her expression, curiosity? Concern? Then she, too, was gone. Zuko shut the door with a sharp click. For a moment, he just stood there, his palm pressed against the polished wood, his breathing slow and controlled. But beneath the surface, rage coiled in his chest like a serpent, its venom burning through his veins. It was painful, this anger, a physical weight pressing against his ribs, his throat, his skull. He couldn't hold it in. With a guttural roar, he threw his head back and unleashed a torrent of fire straight upward, the flames licking the ceiling black. The heat seared his lungs, but the release was worth it, if only for the fleeting second of relief. Then it was over. His shoulders slumped as he turned, his eyes landing on Katara, still seated on the edge of his bed. She was watching him, her blue eyes wide, her fingers clutching the fabric of her borrowed Fire Nation dress. Shit! He'd forgotten she was even there for a moment. Zuko dragged a hand down his face and crossed the room, sinking onto the mattress beside her. His mind was a storm, Azula's taunts, his own outburst, the way he'd snapped like a frayed wire. Why? He didn't just protect Katara. He'd shielded her. Risked exposing himself. For what? His thoughts spiraled. He lusted after Azula, that was no secret to himself. His ambitions were clear, claim her, dominate her, make her his in every way. But Katara? Was she just a pawn? A hostage? Then why did the thought of Azula's flames touching her make his blood boil? A soft voice pulled him from his thoughts. Thank you. Zuko blinked. Katara was staring at the floor, her voice barely above a whisper. If you'd actually slapped her, he admitted gruffly, I don't know what I could have done to save you. Touching royalty is a death sentence, Katara. Like I told you that day, until all my rights are fully restored, my power has limits. I understand, she murmured. But her voice was thick, her breathing uneven. Zuko frowned. Was she? He leaned closer, studying her. Her shoulders trembled slightly, her fingers clenched and unclenched in her lap. And then he heard it, the faintest sniffle, the hitch in her breath. She's trying not to cry. Something in his chest twisted. Without thinking, he reached out, his hand hovering over her shoulder. Are you sure she didn't hurt you? Katara didn't answer. But the way she curled in on herself, the way her breath shuddered, told him everything. Zuko acted on instinct. He climbed onto the bed fully, his movements slow but deliberate, and pulled her against his chest. To his surprise, she didn't resist. No flinch, No stiffening, just a quiet surrender as she turned her face into his tunic, her body molding against his. Her warmth seeped into him, her heart beat a rapid flutter against his ribs. "Everything will be fine, Katara," he murmured, his voice softer than he'd ever heard it. "Please, trust me when I say that." He didn't know why he said it. Didn't know why he meant it. But as her fingers curled into his shirt, as her silent tears dampened the fabric over his heart, Zuko realized something terrifying. He cared. And that changed everything. Chapter 37, Morning Embers. The first light of dawn spilled through the tall windows of Prince Zuko's chambers, painting the red walls in hues of gold and amber. Katara stirred, her consciousness drifting slowly to the surface as the warmth of the morning sun brushed her face. She blinked, her eyes open, momentarily disoriented by the unfamiliar surroundings, the opulent furnishings, the scent of sandalwood and smoke lingering in the air. Then she felt it, the weight of an arm draped possessively over her waist, the solid heat of a body pressed against her back. "Zuko!" Her breath hitched as the memories of the previous night flooded back, the confrontation with Azula, the way he'd shielded her, the unexpected comfort of his embrace. And now here they were, tangled together atop the silken covers, his chest rising and falling in steady rhythm against her. Katara's heart pounded. "I stayed in his arms all night." She tried to shift, to slip free, but his grip was firm even in sleep. His fingers curled slightly against her stomach as if subconsciously refusing to let go. A flush crept up her neck. "I should pull away. I should hate this." But she didn't. Instead, she lay perfectly still, hyper-aware of every point where their bodies touched, the way his breath tickled the nape of her neck, the faint scent of fire and spice clinging to his skin. A traitorous thought whispered in her mind. "I feel safe." The realization sent a jolt through her. Safe? With Zuko? The prince who had hunted Aang, who had dragged her here as his prisoner. Yet, the way he'd held her last night hadn't been cruel. It had been protective. And now, in the quiet of morning, she couldn't summon the anger she once thought to find him in her eyes. Just then, Zuko grunted, his body shifting behind her. His arm lifted from her waist as he rolled onto his back, rubbing his face with a rough hand. Katara held her breath, unsure if she should pretend to still be asleep. But it was too late. Zuko sat up, the sheets rustling as he swung his legs over the edge of the bed. He stretched, the muscles of his bare back flexing beneath the scars she'd only glimpsed before. Without a word, he stood and reached for his discarded robe. Katara turned her head slightly, watching him. And then, their eyes met. A beat of silence stretched between them, thick and unreadable. Katara's lips parted, but no words came. What could she even say? "Thank you? Why did you hold me? Do you feel this too, this confusing, terrifying pull?" Zuko broke the gaze first. "It's fine, Katara," he said, his voice rough with sleep. "I'm going to train. Talk to the palace maids for breakfast." He shrugged on his robe, tying it loosely at his waist. "After training, I'll bathe. Then we'll eat together." And just like that, he was gone, the door clicking shut behind him. Katara exhaled, her fingers clutching the sheets. What is happening to me? The hatred she carried for him felt distant now, blurred at the edges like ink in water. In its place was something far more dangerous, something she couldn't name. Outside, the palace stirred to life. But in the quiet of Zuko's room, Katara remained, her heart racing, her mind a storm. The training grounds of the royal palace were vast, an open courtyard of polished stone surrounded by towering braziers that burned day and night. The morning air was crisp, the scent of smoke and char lingering from the previous night's celebrations. Zuko stood in the center, bare-chested, his muscles taut with tension. His skin glistened with a sheen of sweat already forming, though he hadn't even begun. His breath came in controlled bursts, but his mind was anything but calm. Why? The question gnawed at him like a persistent ember. Back on Earth he had slept with more women than he cared to remember, conquests, courtesans, escorts, prostitutes, hookers, stripper, models who sought favor with him and the firm. None of them had ever left him feeling like this. But Katara? A child. A water tribe peasant. And yet, when he held her, something inside him had shifted. Something dangerous. His fists clenched, nails biting into his palms. Pathetic. With a snarl, he unleashed his frustration in a torrent of fire. A column of flames erupted from his fists, spiraling into the sky like a furious dragon taking flight. The heat distorted the air, the force of it sending a shockwave through the courtyard. He didn't stop there, his body moved on instinct, a blur of motion as he launched into a series of acrobatic forms. Fire surged from his feet as he flipped backward, the flames propelling him higher. A spinning kick sent a crescent of fire slicing through the air, followed by a sweeping arc from his palms. Each movement was precise, fluid, less like bending and more like a dance. The fire wasn't just a weapon. It was an extension of him. He didn't need to charge his attacks, didn't need to gather his breath. The flames answered his will as naturally as his own limbs. A flick of his wrist sent a whip of fire cracking through the air, a snap of his fingers ignited a controlled burst at his fingertips. The more he moved, the lighter he felt. The frustration, the confusion, the weakness, it all burned away in the heat of his bending. By the time he landed from a final, soaring flip, his chest heaving, the courtyard was no longer empty. Dozens of soldiers and servants had gathered at the edges, their eyes wide with awe. Firebending was taught as a tool of destruction, a force to be wielded with ruthless efficiency. But what they had just witnessed was something else entirely. Zuko's fire was controlled. It wasn't just raw power, it was like a dance, an art. For a long moment, he stood there, the last embers of his fury fading into the morning air. Then, slowly, he lowered himself into the lotus position, his eyes closing as he focused on his breathing. In. Out. The heat of his anger cooled. The storm in his mind stilled. When he opened his eyes again, the world was clearer. He stood, his body slick with sweat, the scent of smoke clinging to his skin. He needed that bath more than he thought. As he strode back toward the palace, he didn't notice the whispers that followed him, the murmurs of the soldiers, the impressed glances of the servants. And high above, in the shadowed balcony of his private chambers, Fire Lord Ozai watched his son disappear inside, a slow, calculating smile curling his lips. Chapter 38, A Family Breakfast. The palace gardens were a rare oasis of calm in the Fire Nation's volcanic heart, manicured hedges framing pathways of polished obsidian, lotus ponds glinting under the morning sun, and fiery red canna flowers blooming in defiance of the ashen skies. Zuko sat at a wrought iron table, his posture relaxed but his eyes sharp as Katara approached. She hesitated at the edge of the terrace, her water tribe complexion stark against the garden's crimson and black palette. "Sit down, Katara," Zuko said, gesturing to the chair opposite him. His tone was casual, but the command beneath it was unmistakable. "Eat. We'll go see Aang soon." Katara's jaw tightened, but she obeyed, sliding into the seat with deliberate slowness. The table was laden with Fire Nation delicacies, steaming buns filled with spiced pork, sliced mangoes glazed in honey, and a carafe of tamarind juice that sparkled like liquid amber. She reached for the juice first, the sweet tang momentarily distracting her from the prince's piercing gaze. "You look like you've never seen food before," Zuko remarked, tearing into a bun with deliberate crudeness. Katara ignored him, selecting a slice of warm bread instead. It was softer than she expected, almost melting on her tongue. Traitorously good, she thought, hating herself for enjoying even a crumb of Fire Nation luxury. "Look at you," a warm voice interrupted, "like you've never left home." Iroh emerged from the palace, his robes billowing around him like a benevolent storm cloud. Zuko's stern expression softened imperceptibly. "Uncle," Zuko greeted, genuine warmth threading his voice. "We are home." "Indeed we are, nephew," Iroh said, settling into a chair with a contented sigh. His eyes twinkled as he turned to Katara. "Good morning, young lady. How did you sleep on your first night in the Fire Nation?" Katara choked on her juice, her cheeks flushing scarlet. Zuko snorted into his tea. Iroh raised a brow. Zuko, what did you do? Nothing happened, Uncle, Zuko said, rolling his eyes. Azula and her circus of sycophants decided to pay a visit. It was entertaining. Iroh's gaze lingered on Katara's stiff shoulders. If you need anything, you come to me, understand? Zuko leaned forward, his smirk fading. I can protect her. Not from Azula, Iroh said quietly. You brought this girl here. Now you bear the responsibility. I did just that last night, Zuko snapped, his fingers tightening around his cup. Before Iroh could reply, a servant glided over with a tray. Your hot water and tea, General Iroh. Ah, thank you. Iroh beamed, pouring himself a cup with ceremonial care. The steam curled upward, carrying the scent of jasmine. He turned back to Zuko, his tone shifting. Have you spoken with Ozai? The air thickened. Not yet, Zuko said, his voice flat. I'm meeting him in the war room after this. And before you ask, yes, I'll see the Avatar first. Iroh's expression darkened. Be careful, Zuko. Your father has been a serpent in the grass far longer than you've been a man. Zuko's jaw twitched. I know. Well, look what we have here, a razor-edged voice cut through the garden. Azula strode onto the terrace, her armor gleaming like freshly spilled blood. Her eyes raked over the trio, lingering on Katara with predatory interest. How was your first night back in your own bed, Zuzu? Soft enough after 3 years of ship cots? Zuko leaned back, his grin sharp. It was fine. You could have joined us if you were feeling scared. Azula's smile froze. I don't get scared. Of course not, Zuko purred. You're a big girl now, Azuzu. Stop calling me that. Azula's voice dripped venom. Zuko burst into laughter, a rich, mocking sound that echoed off the garden walls. Zuko is just teasing you, Azuzu, another voice rumbled. The Fire Lord emerged from the shadows, his presence suffocating the sunlight. Ozai's blood-red robes shimmered with threads of gold. Good morning, family. It has been such a long time since I have seen you all together like this. Father, Zuko and Azula intoned in unison. Brother, Iroh added, his cheer brittle. Ozai's gaze settled on Katara. And who is this? Azula opened her mouth to speak. Funny enough, father, she is, Zuko cut her off. Careful, Azula, he said. The warning was mild, almost conversational, but Azula stiffened as it struck. Zuko turned to Ozai, his voice smooth. Her name is Katara. I found her in the Southern Water Tribe, fighting alongside the Avatar. She caught my eye. He shrugged, as if discussing a trinket. A man at sea needs companionship. Katara's throat tightened, but she forced herself to stare at her plate. Ozai tilted his head. Beautiful as can be seen, yes. But you claim she's a fighter. Why not chain her? Zuko smirked. Chains ruin the aesthetics. It goes against her purpose to have her around in rusty old and heavy chains. Besides, he sipped his tea, his eyes glinting. Her brother's rotting in my brig. If she misbehaves, he dies. Simple. Iroh's knuckles whitened around his cup. Katara's breath hitched, Zuko's lie was too convincing, too cold. Ozai chuckled, a sound like embers crumbling. Efficient. But remember, Zuko, pets bite back when provoked far enough. Zuko met his father's gaze. Not if you break them first. The Fire Lord's smile widened. We'll discuss your strategies in the war room. As Ozai turned to leave, Azula shot Zuko a look of pure loathing. Katara stared at her hands, the bread turning to ash in her mouth. The game, it seemed, was far from over. The palace corridors swallowed them whole, their footsteps echoing against walls lined with tapestries of Fire Lord's past, faces frozen in conquest, flames licking at their heels. Zuko walked briskly, Katara trailing a half-step behind, her eyes darting to every shadow. "You lied to your father," she hissed, breaking the silence. "You made it sound like Sokka is already dead." Zuko didn't slow. "If you believe what you say is true, so will everyone else. That's how this works. And if I don't play along?" He glanced back, his gaze slicing through her. "Then your brother becomes the lie." Katara's fists clenched, but she said nothing. The stairwell to the dungeons was guarded by a hulking firebender, his armor scorched from training. He snapped to attention at Zuko's approach. "Prince Zuko," the guard grunted, eyeing Katara. "Orders require all visitors to be searched." Zuko spread his arms, his voice edged with impatience. "Search me. But touch her, and I'll melt your gauntlets to your skin." The guard hesitated, then waved a hand over Zuko's robes with perfunctory sweeps. When he turned to Katara, Zuko stepped between them. "Her loyalty is mine to vouch for." "Understood?" The guard bowed stiffly. "Of course, Your Highness." As they descended, Katara muttered, "You enjoy this, don't you? The threats, the power." Zuko smirked. "Power is only as real as the fear behind it. Remember that." The second landing was narrower, lit by flickering torches. A younger guard stood here, her eyes sharp but nervous. "Prince Zuko," she said, voice trembling. "The Avatar's cell requires dual verification. Your seal, and a password." Zuko leaned in, his tone icy. "The password is 'let me through,' or I'll have your commander flay you alive." The guard palmed a lever, the wall shuddering open. Apologies, Prince." Katara waited until they were out of earshot. "You're reckless. What if she called your bluff?" "Bluffs only fail when you doubt yourself," Zuko said. "And I don't. Not in this world at least," he thought. The final guard was an aging veteran, his face scarred and weary. He eyed Zuko with a mix of respect and suspicion. "Prince," he said, blocking the iron gate. "The Fire Lord's orders, no one enters without his direct approval." Zuko's voice dropped to a growl. "My father's orders also state that the Avatar's fate rests with me. Or would you like to explain to Fire Lord Ozai why his heir was delayed?" The guard's jaw tightened, but he stepped aside. "Your funeral, boy." As the door clanged shut behind them, Katara grabbed Zuko's arm. "How do you expect to getting out of here? There are layers of guards, seals, passwords." Zuko yanked free. "You think I'd drag you to the capital without a plan? The Fire Nation's obsession with order is its weakness. Every system has cracks. And if they kill him before you find yours? We have enough time." Within a few minutes they reached the end of the dungeon. Aang sat cross-legged in the center of a circular chamber, his wrists chained to the floor with glowing red cuffs. The air reeked of damp stone and ash. "Katara!" He lunged forward, chains clanking. "Are you okay? Did they hurt you?" "I'm fine," she said, kneeling beside him. "What about you?" Aang forced a smile. "They ask a lot of questions. Where are the air temple's secrets hidden? How many waterbenders are really left in the south?" I just meditated. Zuko leaned against the wall, arms crossed. "They won't risk killing you." "Not yet." Aang's smile faded. "Why?" "Because if you die, the Avatar cycle continues. The next one will be born in the Water Tribe tomorrow, most likely the almighty powerful Northern Water Tribe. They'd have to start this war all over again." Zuko pushed off the wall, his voice lowering. "But my father's no fool. He'll consult the sages, find a way to end the cycle permanently." Katara stood, her voice trembling. "Then we get him out. Now." Zuko's eyes flicked to the ceiling, where the faint hum of machinery pulsed. "Not yet. Like I said, we have time. I still haven't been officially crowned as the Crown Prince." Aang frowned. You know you could have left me here and gone on to claim your throne. For a heartbeat, Zuko's mask slipped, a flash of something raw, almost pained. Remember our deal, Aang, when you leave this place. Forget about me claiming the throne, I just need you to take care of your side of the deal. Katara stepped closer. What deal? He turned away. Ask me again when your brother's free. As they retreated up the stairs, Aang called after them, Zuko. The prince paused. Thank you. Zuko didn't look back. Save it for when we're all alive tomorrow. Chapter 39, Webs of Deceit. The communications tower loomed over the port, its obsidian spire clawing at the ashen sky. Princess Azula strode through the gates, her boots clicking against the volcanic stone as Fire Nation soldiers snapped to attention. Their uniforms, crimson tunics layered with black armor, helmets embossed with the flame insignia, gleamed under the harsh midday sun. The chief is expecting me, Azula declared, not breaking stride. Yes, princess, a soldier barked, stepping forward. Shall I escort? I know my way, she cut him off, her tone leaving no room for argument. The tower's interior was a labyrinth of smoke-stained corridors. An endless mountain of papers and repots and scrolls in every floor and every room. Azula ascended the spiral staircase, her reflection flickering in the polished metal walls. At the top floor, she pushed open the heavy iron door to Chief Hiroshi's office. The room smelled of ink and burnt parchment. Chief Hiroshi, a wisp of a man with a silver beard and spectacles perched on his nose, rose from his desk. Flanking him were two operatives, a young woman in loose Earth Kingdom garb, her hair braided with beads, and a broad-shouldered Fire Nation officer whose uniform bore the insignia of Zhao's naval division. Welcome, Princess, Hiroshi began. Are these the leaders of the operatives? Azula interrupted, her gaze slicing past him to the pair. Why yes, Hiroshi stammered. Lieutenant Daisuke oversaw reconnaissance at Commander Zhao's naval base. Miss Nalia infiltrated Kyoshi Island. The operatives bowed. An honor to meet you, Princess, they chorused. I'm sure it is, Azula said, settling into Hiroshi's chair without invitation. Report. Start with the naval base. Daisuke cleared his throat. Prince Zuko's ship docked at Zhao's base 8 days ago. The damage was minor, they could have easily sailed to the capital. Yet they stayed to resupply. He paused, choosing his words carefully. According to witnesses, Prince Zuko clashed with Lieutenant Tao over disrespect shown to General Iroh. Commander Zhao intervened, inviting them to lunch, while secretly ordering Lieutenant Tao to investigate Prince Zuko's ship. Azula's fingers drummed the desk. And what did Tao find? The crew claimed Prince Zuko had captured the Avatar, and let him escape. Convenient, Azula muttered. Zuko admitted as much at the banquet, but framed it as a ruse. Was it? Commander Zhao confronted him about this, Daisuke continued. They argued and harsh words were exchanged. Ultimately Prince Zuko challenged him to an Agni Kai. Azula held up a hand. I know how that ended. What matters is what happened after. Daisuke hesitated. Prince Zuko lost. Badly. But the commander's victory made him arrogant. He stopped pursuing the prince's ship. Azula's lips twitched. Zuko's plan worked. He wanted Zhao to underestimate him. The realization burned. Everything he said at the banquet was true. He made it all seem like it was a ruse, but he told the truth as if he was hiding something and even dared me to expose it. She turned to Nalia. Kyoshi Island. What did my brother do there? Nalia's voice was steady, but her knuckles whitened on the edge of the desk. Prince Zuko arrived days after the naval incident. The Avatar was already in chains. Villagers say the prince arrived with the Avatar already captured. This confirms it, Nalia confirmed. Prince Zuko lied to Commander Zhao. He did capture the Avatar at the South Pole, then let information leak purposefully that had him escape as part of some scheme. So if he already had the Avatar captured when he reached Kyoshi, what exactly was he doing there? Azula asked. Zuko's footsteps echoed through the cavernous corridor leading to the war room, his mind churning with strategies. As he rounded a corner, Lieutenant G materialized from the shadows, his weathered face grim. Zuko glanced around, empty. "Report." "As you suspected, sire," G murmured. "Princess Azula's agents are digging into our movements. They've questioned crewmen about Kyoshi Island and Commander Zhao's base." "And my father?" "The Fire Lord's spies are subtler. We haven't identified them yet." Zuko's jaw tightened. "Keep the men silent. If anyone talks—" "They won't," G said firmly. "But there's more. Commander Zhao arrived at the port last night." Zuko's pulse spiked. "Zhao? Here?" "Yes. He's been sequestered in the guest quarters. No audience with the Fire Lord yet." Zuko forced his breathing steady. Azula's probing. Zhao's sudden arrival. Father's silence. The pieces were aligning dangerously. "Maintain vigilance," he ordered. "And G, no one breathes a word of Kyoshi." "Understood?" "Of course, my prince." As G melted back into the shadows, Zuko stared at the war room's gilded doors. "One misstep, and this web strangles us all." He pushed open the doors and stepped into the room. The war room hummed with the low crackle of flame and the clatter of armor as Fire Lord Ozai's council assembled. A massive obsidian table dominated the space, its surface etched with a glowing map of the Earth Kingdom. Omash's mountainous terrain pulsed red, a jagged scar in the heart of enemy territory. Zuko arrived at his father's right, his scarred eye narrowed as he studied the map. Across the table, generals and admirals in immaculate crimson uniforms exchanged wary glances. The prodigal prince's return had upended their carefully curated hierarchies. Fire Lord Ozai lifted a hand, silencing the room. "Omashu remains unconquered. Its king may rot in old age, but its people cling to defiance. We will correct this." His golden eyes flicked to Zuko. "My son has walked among the Earth Kingdom's vermin. He will provide perspective." The unspoken challenge hung in the air. "Prove your worth." Admiral Rome, a grizzled tactician with salt and pepper hair, stabbed a finger at the map. "Omash's tunnels render traditional siege tactics useless. Earthbenders collapse our advances before we breach the outer walls. I propose a naval blockade of the western riverways. Starve them into submission." General Mack, a bullish man with a neck thicker than his skull, snorted. "Starve them? Why waste time? Burn the surrounding villages. Let their refugees flood Omash's gates. When the city buckles under the strain, we crush it." Zuko stepped forward, his voice cold. "And how many divisions will you sacrifice pacifying the survivors? The Earth Kingdom's loyalty is to their land, not their king. Burn their homes, and you create martyrs." General Shainu, his chin marred by an old Earth Kingdom axe wound, sneered. "What would you know of loyalty, Prince Zuko? You spent 3 years chasing ghosts." Zuko's gaze sharpened. "I know that Omash's strength isn't its walls, it's the trade routes snaking through the mountains." He traced a path on the map with a gloved finger. "Merchant caravans bypass your blockades here, here, and here. They're run by non-benders who care more about coin than kings. Turn them. Promise safe passage in exchange for information on Omash's supply caches. Lastly, General Shainu, I did find that little ghost of yours. I will not stand such disrespect from you again," he warned with a venomous tone. The challenge was laid down early. This was not the same Zuko they knew. If anyone dared provoke him, he was more than willing to show them their place. Admiral Rome raised a skeptical brow. "And when these merchants betray us?" Zuko's smile was a knife. "Then you burn their caravans after they lead you to the caches. Fear and greed are sharper than fire." A murmur rippled through the council. General Bujing, gaunt and hawk-faced, stepped into the flickering light. His voice tripped with disdain. "A pretty strategy for a pirate, not a warrior. Omash's earthbenders will retreat into their tunnels the moment we advance. Crushing them requires overwhelming force. He gestured to a valley north of the city. Lure their army here. Sacrifice a division as bait. When they commit, incinerate them all. The room chilled. Zuko turned slowly, his golden eyes locking onto Bujing. Ah, General Bujing. Still peddling sacrifice as strategy. Tell me, how many of the 41st Division did you burn at Garsai? 2,000? 3? Bujing's knuckles whitened. War demands sacrifice. No, Zuko said, stepping closer. War demands victory. You've had 3 years to take Omashu. Yet here we are. He leaned in, his voice dropping to a lethal whisper. Perhaps you should lead the charge this time. I'll light your pyre myself. Bujing's hand twitched toward upward as if ready to summon the fire, but Ozai's voice cracked like lightning. Enough. Zuko stepped back, his expression smooth. Of course, father. General Hark, a wiry strategist with a serpent's grin, broke the silence. Why choose one tactic when we can combine them? Admiral Rong blockades the rivers. General Mac harasses the villages, but spares the granaries. Let Omashu's people believe they can flee to safety, only to find their stores already claimed by our agents. Zuko nodded. And while their army scrambles to protect the hinterlands, we strike here. He tapped a narrow mountain pass west of Omashu. The Earth Kingdom garrisons are stretched thin defending the coast. A swift assault inland forces them to split their forces. Omashu's defenders will be isolated. Admiral Rong stroked his beard. Risky. If the Earth Kingdom reinforcements arrive. They won't, Zuko interrupted. Their generals are too proud to abandon the coast. They'll assume the mountain strike is a feint. Fire Lord Ozai steepled his fingers. Admiral Rong, you will secure the rivers. General Mac, burn the villages, but leave the granaries intact. General Hark, coordinate the misinformation campaign. Bujing, his gaze lingered on the disgraced general. You will oversee the blockade. Fail again, and your ashes will fertilize the Si Wong Desert. As the council dispersed, Zuko lingered by the map. Admiral Rong approached, grudging respect in his tone. You've changed, Prince Zuko. 3 years ago, you'd have challenged Bujing to an Agni Kai. Zuko didn't look up. Everyone grows up in some way, General. Bujing's irrelevance will be punishment enough. In the corridor outside, Azula leaned against the wall, her smirk razor thin, having just returned from her debrief. Bravo, Zuzu. Playing general suits you. But remember, father's favor is fickle. Zuko brushed past her. Save your theatrics for the circus, Azula. As he strode away, his mind churned. Omashu's fall will buy time, but at what cost? The faces of Earth Kingdom villagers, ones he bartered with, fought beside the old Zuko, flashed in his mind. Sacrifice. The word tasted like ash. The memories of the original Zuko helped a great deal in there. The only strategy he knew he learnt playing Age of Empires. Fortunately for him, the old Zuko spent most of his time imagining himself back in that room. On his travels he had studied the Earthbenders and their people, hoping to one day conquer them as part of the Fire Nation. The crowning ceremony wouldn't come in fast enough. He had to be out there where he could change things properly. He had to be out in the world to see how much things had really changed. Characters like Zhao were just the start of things changed, he suspected. Chapter 40, Learn to Pretend. The afternoon sun streamed through the open balcony doors of Zuko's chambers, casting long golden shafts across the polished obsidian floors. Katara stood near the bed, her fingers nervously tracing the embroidered hem of her Crimson Fire Nation dress. She had just returned from the brig of Zuko's ship, where Sokka, still imprisoned aboard Zuko's ship, had cracked jokes with the guards about Fire Nation hospitality while secretly passing her a folded scrap of parchment hidden in a bread roll. The message burned in her pocket, unread. Zuko sat at his desk on the balcony, his back to her, scribbling notes onto a scroll. The breeze ruffled his hair, still damp from earlier bath. Without turning, he spoke. You told him the delay is necessary? Katara stiffened. Yes. He didn't seem surprised. Sokka's sarcasm is a survival tactic. As long as he's alive to wield it, he'll endure. Zuko's quill paused. You, on the other hand, look like you've swallowed a live eel. Katara glared at his back. Why are you being like this? Sokka's joking with the guards. The crew treats him like a guest. And Aang, what's this deal you mentioned? What are you planning? Zuko set down his quill. The silence stretched, taut as a bowstring. Then, crunch. A faint creak echoed from the hallway. Zuko's head snapped up, his nostrils flaring as if scenting smoke. In one fluid motion, he surged to his feet and lunged across the room, his boots silent against the stone. Katara barely had time to gasp before he flung open the door and vanished into the corridor. She followed, peering out to see him stalking down the hall, his gaze sharp as a hawk's. Servants scattered like leaves in his wake, bowing and murmuring apologies. Zuko paused, scanning the shadows, then turned back with a scowl. Paranoia suits you, Katara muttered as he re-entered the room. Zuko shut the door with a soft click. You think this is paranoia? He stepped closer, his voice dropping to a venomous whisper. Every word you speak here is heard. Every move, watched. My father's spies don't take breaks. Katara crossed her arms. Then why bring me here? Why not just? Zuko's hand shot out, gripping her shoulders. She stumbled back, her spine hitting the wall as he crowded into her space. His breath warmed her cheek, his golden eyes blazing. When you have questions like that, he hissed, his lips brushing her ear, whisper. Katara's heart hammered. His scent of smoke and salt and something sharp, like citrus, flooded her senses. She opened her mouth to protest, but his left hand slid from her shoulder to her chest, his palm pressing against the soft curve of her breast. She froze. Stand still, he murmured, his voice low and dangerous. Katara's face burned. His fingers tightened slightly, the heat of his touch searing through the thin fabric of her dress. She couldn't breathe, couldn't think. The door swung open. Mai stood in the threshold, her expression as lifeless as a porcelain mask. Her black and crimson robes clung to her slender frame, her dark eyes flicking between Zuko's hand on Katara's chest and his face. Did my sister send you to spy on me? Zuko asked, not loosening his grip. Mai tilted her head. Would I admit it if she did? Katara's breath hitched. Zuko's thumb brushed lazily over her collarbone, his gaze never leaving Mai. You've always had terrible timing, he said. Mai's lips twitched. And you've always had terrible taste. For a heartbeat, no one moved. Then Zuko released Katara, stepping back with a smirk. Tell Azula her games are transparent. If she wants secrets, she'll have to work harder. Mai's eyes narrowed, but she turned on her heel and vanished. Katara sagged against the wall, her legs trembling. What was that? Zuko poured himself a cup of tea, his demeanor calm as if nothing had happened. A reminder. In this palace, every touch, every word, is a weapon. Even yours. You used me. To provoke her? To send a message? Zuko sipped his tea. You agreed to play your part, Katara. Or did you think servant meant folding my laundry? She stared at him, her voice shaking. You're worse than Azula. He set down the cup, his smile brittle. No. I'm better. And if you want your brother and the Avatar to live, you'll learn the difference. I can't believe you just touched me. Why no warning, she hissed, her voice shaking. Like I'm some toy for your stupid games. Zuko didn't look up from the scroll. He was busy with before. I hate repeating myself, but like I just said, you agreed to play a role. This is part of it. This wasn't part of the deal. She stormed forward, her fists clenched. You don't get to just grab me whenever it suits you. You said you wouldn't rape me. Finally, he met her gaze, a smirk tugging at his lips. Would you prefer I ask permission first? Princess Katara, may I fondle you for the sake of our charade? Her face flushed crimson. Don't mock me. I'm not. He stood, circling her like a predator. But let's be clear, every servant, every guard, every spy in this palace expects me to treat you exactly as I did. A prince doesn't keep a peasant girl in his chambers for her conversation. Katara backed up, but he closed the distance, his voice dropping. And let's not pretend you're shocked. You knew what this would entail when you bargained for your brother's life. I didn't know you'd be so disgusting and straightforward. Zuko's smirk widened. Disgusting? Or inexperienced? She froze. What? He leaned in, his breath hot on her ear. That was your first time, wasn't it? Being touched like that by anyone. Katara's heart raced. That's none of your business. Oh, but it is. His hand brushed her waist, and she jerked away. If you can't handle a little teasing, how will you survive what comes next? What comes next? Stop talking in riddles. Zuko sighed, feigning boredom. You think the Fire Lord's spies care about subtlety? They need a show. And unless you want your brother's cell mysteriously catching fire tonight, you'll stop squawking like a startled turtle duck and learn to perform. Katara's voice trembled with rage. Perform? You want me to pretend I enjoy this? Enjoy? Zuko barked a laugh. No one cares what you feel. They care what they see. He stepped closer again, his gaze piercing. But if it bothers you so much, here's a lesson. Next time I touch you, touch me back. Her eyes widened. What? Grab my arm. Smile. Whisper something cruel in my ear. His fingers trailed up her sleeve, deliberate and slow. Make them believe you're here willingly. That you're mine. Katara slapped his hand away. I'd rather kiss a viper. Zuko's smile turned feral. Careful. Vipers bite. Before she could retort, he gripped her chin, forcing her to meet his eyes. You think I want this? You think I enjoy babysitting a waterbender who can't tell a lie without blushing? His thumb brushed her lip, his voice softening mockingly. Well, actually I do prefer doing this with you, but there are much more important things going on, so here we are. So either play the game, or watch your brother and the Avatar burn. Katara wrenched free, her chest heaving. You're a monster. No, Zuko said coldly, turning back to his desk. I'm the only thing standing between you and the real monsters. She stood there, trembling, until he added without looking up. Oh, and Katara? Try practicing in the mirror. Your outrage is unconvincing. That's the end of this tale for now. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in part 3. Peace.